If Detective David Lynch hadn't taken that left turn, he would have never seen the dog. And if he hadn't seen the dog, 23 children might still be locked away in the dark. It was one of those cold November afternoons in Mason Creek, Vermont, when the daylight seemed to give up early. The streets were quiet, the trees stripped bare, and the smell of wood smoke hung in the air. November 14th, a day that would change everything. The wind cut like a roar across the abandoned streets. Rain fell in sheets, pounding against weathered asphalt. Storm clouds rolled overhead, casting the small town in premature darkness. In the distance, the silhouette of an old Victorian house stood against the darkening sky. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out at a world that had forgotten it existed. For 15 years, Detective David Lynch had walked these streets, the kind of cop who didn't scare easy and didn't jump to conclusions. But that day, something got under his skin before he even knew why. He was idling at a stop sign when he spotted it. A large German shepherd, sable coat rippling in the wind, sitting on the curb across from that old weathered house. The place looked like it had been abandoned since the Carter administration. Windows clouded with grime, shingles curling on the roof, porch railings sagging like tired shoulders. But the dog wasn't just loitering, it was staring. Shadow, that's the name David would give her later, sat with his body perfectly still, ears forward, amber eyes locked on the house's front door as he waiting for it to open. David rolled down the window. "Hey, buddy." The shepherd didn't so much as blink. The light turned green, and David drove on, telling himself it was nothing. But 3 blocks later, the image of that dog's posture still had its claws in his mind. He knew working dogs. He'd been paired with canine units before, and this was no random stance. This was focus. This was purpose. What David couldn't know then was that behind those walls, beneath layers of rotting wood and concrete, 23 souls waited in darkness. 23 children who had vanished without anyone looking for them. And only one sentinel kept watch. The nightmare always started the same way. Darkness, rain, the scent of pine and wet earth. David's boots sinking into mud as he ran, flashlight beam cutting wild arcs through the forest. Ahead, a small figure darted between trees. A child, no more than 7 years old. "Stop! Police! I'm here to help you!" The child looked back, face pale with terror. Not of the man chasing him, but of something else. Something worse. A flash of movement to the left. A shadow with human shape but inhuman speed. The child screamed. Then came the loyal thunder of paws. Max, David's canine partner, surging past him, a blur of black and tan fur. The shepherd's bark echoed through the trees as he intercepted the shadow, jaws locking around an arm. A gunshot cracked the night open. Silence. David always woke the same way, too. Gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, reaching for a dog that wasn't there anymore. This morning was no different. His apartment was cold, the radiator clicking uselessly in the corner. November light filtered gray through blinds he hadn't opened in days. Empty whiskey bottle on the nightstand, service weapon locked in the drawer below it. 2 years. 2 years since he'd lost Max. 2 years since he'd failed to save that child from the man the papers called the collector. 2 years of desk duty and solitary patrols because he couldn't bear to work with another canine unit. David showered underwater hot enough to hurt, letting the steam cloud the bathroom mirror so he wouldn't have to see himself. 40 years old now. Still fit, but with new lines around his eyes, a permanent furrow between his brows. His dark hair showed touches of gray at the temples. The apartment was sparse. No photographs on the walls. No personal touches except Max's old collar hanging by the door. A reminder of failure that he couldn't bring himself to put away. The drive to the station took 11 minutes. Same route every day. Past the elementary school. Past the diner where he used to stop for breakfast with Max. Past the park where they'd trained together. Mason Creek Police Department. Small building, brick facade, American flag hanging limp in the windless morning. Inside, fluorescent lights and the smell of burnt coffee. A dozen desks in the main room. His in the corner, away from the windows, away from the canine units area. Lynch, Sergeant Coleman stood in the doorway of his office. 55, built like a retired linebacker, with salt and pepper hair cropped military short. The only one who still believed David could come back from what happened. Got a minute? David followed him inside. Coleman's office was cluttered but organized. Citations on the walls, family photos on the desk, a life well lived. Got your patrol route for today. Coleman slid a paper across the desk. East side, including the old Miller Road area. David nodded. Empty streets, abandoned buildings, keeping him away from people where he couldn't do any more damage. It's been 2 years, David. I know how long it's been. The department's psychologist says you're fit for full duty. The department's psychologist didn't watch his partner die. Coleman's face softened. Max was a good dog, one of our best, but he did his job. He protected you. He died because I hesitated. That kid died because I hesitated. The collector had killed before. He'll kill again. But that's not on you. David looked away. Through the office window, he could see the K-9 unit preparing for their morning patrol. Officer Jenkins with his Belgian Malinois. Officer Torres with her German Shepherd. The dogs alert, eager to work, like Max had been. I'm fine where I am, Coleman sighed. Just think about coming back to the unit. We need good handlers. David took the patrol route and left without answering. The cruiser felt empty without Max in the back. No panting breath, no occasional whine of excitement, just silence in the static of the police radio. East Mason Creek was the forgotten part of town. All those factories closed in the 90s, houses abandoned when the jobs left. The kind of place where windows were more likely to be boarded up than curtained. David drove slowly, eyes scanning for anything unusual, checking vacant buildings for signs of squatters or drug activity. It was mindless work, safe work. The call came in around noon. All units, we have a 1091V at the Mason Creek Children's Home, juvenile female, approximately 12 years old, missing since last night. Another runaway, the third this month from the same facility. David reached for the radio to respond, then stopped. Missing children weren't his assignment anymore. Not since the collector. He continued his patrol. Miller Road, Victorian houses that had once been grand, now sagging with neglect. Paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Yards overgrown with weeds. That's when he saw it again. The German Shepherd. Same spot as yesterday. Same intense stare directed at the old Wilson house on the corner. The dog sat motionless, focused entirely on the building's front door. David slowed the cruiser. Something about the scene nagged at him. That level of focus wasn't normal. He'd seen it before, though, in K-9 units when they detected something significant. He pulled over and cut the engine. The street was silent except for the faint rustle of dead leaves skittering along the pavement. The dog didn't acknowledge his presence. The Wilson house was a Victorian monstrosity, 3 stories of architectural excess now crumbling into decay. It had been abandoned for decades according to department records, officially condemned, but the city lacked funds to demolish it. Hey there, David approached slowly, hand extended. The shepherd's ears twitched, registering his voice, but its gaze remained fixed on the house. No collar. Good condition, though, not starving or neglected. Someone's pet, maybe? But why was it so fixated on this particular building? Professional instincts stirred beneath the layers of grief and self-doubt. The dog's behavior was deliberate, trained. David studied the house more carefully. Nothing obviously suspicious. Boards over first-floor windows, front door secured with a heavy chain. No signs of recent entry. And yet, a memory surfaced. Max sitting just like this outside a warehouse in Burlington. That same intense focus. They'd found a meth lab inside and 3 suspects with outstanding warrants. David circled the house from a distance. The backyard was overgrown, a tangle of weeds and volunteer saplings. No obvious signs of disturbance. The rear door was boarded up like the front. When he returned to the street, the dog was gone. That night, the dream changed. He was still running through the forest, still chasing the fleeing child, but when he called out, his voice made no sound. When Max rushed past him, he was chasing not the collector, but something else, something leading toward a house that shouldn't be in the middle of the woods. The Wilson house. David woke at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding. Without conscious thought, he found himself at his kitchen table, Police laptop open, searching property records. The Wilson House, built 1892. Once a private residence, then converted to Mason Creek Children's Psychiatric Hospital in 1954. Closed in 2003 after allegations of patient abuse. Purchased in 2009 by Eastern Holdings, LLC. Eastern Holdings, a shell company. Owner of record, William Holloway. The name meant nothing to David, but he kept digging. Holloway was a property developer with investments throughout Vermont and New Hampshire. Philanthropist, major donor to children's charities, including the Mason Creek Children's Home, the same facility that had reported 3 runaways in the past month. Something cold settled in David's stomach. Probably nothing. A coincidence. His mind making connections that weren't there, desperate for meaning. But why would a wealthy developer buy a condemned property and then leave it to rot for 15 years? And why would a boy sit vigil outside it day after day? At the station the next morning, David found himself walking past his usual desk, heading instead to the records room. The civilian clerk looked up in surprise. "Detective Lynch, haven't seen you down here in a while." "Need to check something, Barbara. Missing persons reports for the past 3 years. Juveniles only." She raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. Minutes later, he was alone with a stack of files and a growing sense of unease. 3 runaways from the children's home this month, 4 more in the past year, a total of 12 in the past 3 years, all between ages 8 and 14, all classified as runaways, and all with the same note in their files. History of previous attempts to flee care. None found. David rubbed his eyes. The statistics weren't necessarily unusual for a facility housing troubled youth. Kids ran. Sometimes they didn't want to be found. But 12 with no recoveries? He was still reviewing the files when Coleman found him. "This isn't your assignment, Lynch." David looked up, just curious about something. Coleman studied the files spread across the table. "The children's home cases? Those are Martinez's territory. Officer Gabriel Martinez, 5 years on the force, ambitious, by the book, everything David used to be. Has he found any connection between the cases?" "They're runaways, David. Kids with troubled backgrounds who don't want to be in the system. 12 in 3 years seems high." Coleman sighed. "The children's home takes the tough cases kids other facilities can't handle." He paused. "What's really going on here?" David hesitated. How to explain a hunch based on a staring dog? How to articulate the feeling that had been growing since yesterday without sounding like he'd finally cracked? "Just a feeling. Something not right." Coleman's expression softened slightly. "Your instincts used to be the best in the department. But since Max, this isn't about Max. Everything with you is about Max." David closed the files. "Forget it. I'm heading out on patrol." The German Shepherd was there again. 3rd day in a row. Same position, same unwavering stare at the Wilson house. This time David parked a block away and approached on foot. The dog's ears perked at his footsteps, but it didn't turn. "What are you seeing, boy?" David murmured, crouching beside the animal. "What's in there that's got you so focused?" The shepherd finally acknowledged him with a brief glance. Intelligent eyes, alert, not fearful or aggressive. David extended his hand slowly. The dog sniffed it, then returned to its vigil. "No collar, no tag. Someone must be missing you." The animal's coat was clean, its body lean but muscular. This wasn't a stray. This was a working bum, or had been. David studied the house again. Nothing had changed since yesterday. No signs of entry or activity. Just a derelict building slowly surrendering to time and weather. And yet the dog was certain. Something was in there. Something important. On impulse, David approached the house. The front yard was a tangle of overgrown shrubs and volunteer saplings. The porch steps creaked ominously under his weight. At the front door, a heavy chain and padlock secured the entrance. He peered through a gap in the boards covering a ground floor window. Darkness. The faint outline of what might have been a reception desk. Papers scattered across the floor. Nothing moved. When he turned back, the dog was watching him. Something in its posture had changed. More alert now, almost expectant. "Nothing there, boy. Not that I can see." The shepherd stood, stretched, then trotted to the side of the house. It stopped, looking back at David, clearly wanting him to follow. The side yard was narrower, choked with brambles that tore at his uniform pants. The dog moved confidently through the undergrowth until it reached a ground-level window. The boards covering it appeared intact, but the animal began pawing at the earth beneath it. David knelt, pushing aside weeds to reveal freshly disturbed soil. Something had been digging here, recently. "What did you find, boy?" The dog whined softly, pawing more insistently at the ground. David brushed away more soil, exposing the edge of the window well. The concrete was cracked, creating a small gap between the foundation and the window frame. A gap just large enough for a dog to squeeze through. Or a child. David's pulse quickened. He pulled out his flashlight, shining it into the gap. The beam revealed nothing but darkness beyond. He needed to get inside, but not like this. Not without backup, not without a warrant. He straightened, mind racing. A hunch wasn't enough for a search warrant. He needed something concrete. Evidence. The dog was watching him, head tilted slightly, as if puzzled by his hesitation. "I can't just break in, boy. That's not how it works." The shepherd turned suddenly, ears alert, body tense. A moment later, David heard it too, the sound of a vehicle approaching. He stepped back into the shadow of the house as a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past. The driver wasn't visible, but David caught a glimpse of the passenger. William Holloway, the property owner. He'd seen his photo during last night's research. The dog growled, a low, menacing sound that raised the hair on David's neck. The SUV continued down the street, turned at the corner, and disappeared. "You know him, don't you?" David murmured. "You know what he's doing." The shepherd looked at him, and in that moment, David felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. The silent communication that existed between a handler and a working dog. Understanding without words. He needed to know what was in that house. The Mason Creek Library was housed in a converted church. Gothic arches, stained glass, hushed reverence for knowledge rather than divinity. David found what he needed in the newspaper archives, microfilm reels of local papers dating back decades. He focused on 2003, the year the psychiatric hospital closed. The headlines told the story in fragments. Allegations of abuse at Children's Psychiatric Hospital. Former patient speaks out, "They experimented on us." Hospital director denies wrongdoing. Facility to close state investigation inconclusive. No charges filed. The hospital director's name, Dr. William Holloway. The same William Holloway who now owned the building. The same William Holloway who donated generously to the children's home where 12 kids had vanished. It could still be coincidence. People reinvented themselves, changed careers. Perhaps Holloway had left medicine after the scandal, moved into real estate, and now donated to children's causes out of genuine remorse. Or perhaps not. David kept searching, pulling records from earlier years. The hospital's history stretched back decades. In the 1960s and 70s, it had been renowned for innovative treatments for troubled youth. When a photo showed children in sparse rooms, subjected to what the captions called therapeutic isolation and aversion therapy. One photo in particular caught his attention. A group shot of the medical staff from 1975. Young Dr. Holloway in the center, flanked by colleagues. Behind them, a row of children with vacant eyes. And in the background, partially visible through a doorway, a basement entrance. David leaned closer. The image was grainy but unmistakable. A heavy door with a reinforced frame. The kind of door used to secure an area, not just separate it. The kind of door that kept people in, not out. He photographed the image with his phone, then continued searching more recent records. In 2009, when Holloway purchased the property through his shell company, there had been talk of demolition and redevelopment. Plans filed with the city showed a proposed apartment complex. The project had received initial approval, but then stalled due to environmental concerns. No further permits had been filed. The house had remained untouched. Or had it? David's phone rang. Coleman. "Where are you, Lynch? You're supposed to be on patrol." "Research, following up on something." A pause. "The children's home cases?" "Connected to something else. The old Wilson house on Miller Road." "That condemned property? What about it?" David hesitated. How much to say? How crazy would it sound? "I think someone's using it, someone who might be connected to the missing kids." Coleman's sigh was audible. "Based on what evidence?" I'm still putting it together. David, I know you want to find something meaningful. I know you're looking for redemption after what happened with the collector. But seeing conspiracies where there aren't any won't bring Max back. It won't bring that kid back. The words stung because they contained truth. Was he manufacturing a mystery to redeem himself? Creating connections where none existed? Just give me time to check a few more things. Finish your patrol first. That's your job, detective. The call ended. David sat back, surrounded by fragments of history that might mean everything or nothing. The line between instinct and obsession had always been thin for him. Which side was he on now? His phone chimed with a number he didn't recognize. If you want to know about the missing children, meet me at Riverside Park, 4 p.m. Come alone. David stared at the message. A trap? A prank? Or someone who knew something? Only one way to find out. Riverside Park stretched along the eastern edge of Mason Creek, where the town gave way to forest. Once a popular recreation area, budget cuts had left it semi-wild. The playground equipment was rusted, the picnic tables warped by years of rain and snow. David arrived early, parking his unmarked car at the edge of the lot. From here, he could see the entire park, empty except for a solitary figure sitting on a bench overlooking the water. A woman, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Practical clothes, jeans, boots, a jacket too light for the November chill. He approached cautiously, hand near his weapon. You sent the message? She looked up, tired eyes, the kind of exhaustion that came from caring too much in a system designed to make you stop caring. Detective Lynch, I'm Rachel Winters. I work at the children's home. Not what he'd expected. How did you get my number? Officer Martinez left his case files open on his desk when I was there yesterday. I saw your name in the logs, checking out the missing persons reports. She paused. You're the only one who's shown any real interest. David sat beside her, keeping distance between them. Interest in what? In the fact that 12 children don't just run away without a trace. Her voice was controlled, but an undercurrent of anger ran through it. Some of these kids had nowhere to go. No family, no friends outside the home. Where would they run to? The reports say they all had histories of attempting to flee care. Rachel's laugh was bitter. Convenient, isn't it? Almost like someone added that to their files afterward. The cold feeling in David's stomach intensified. You're saying the records were altered? I'm saying things at the home aren't what they seem. I've worked there 3 years. I know these kids. Jamie Miller didn't run away. She was afraid of the dark, for God's sake. Wouldn't even go to the bathroom alone at night. But I'm supposed to believe she ran off into the woods at midnight. Have you reported your concerns? To who? The administration? The police? Officer Martinez comes by, takes a statement, files a report, and nothing happens. She looked at him directly. Until you started asking questions. David chose his words carefully. I'm interested in the old Wilson house, the former psychiatric hospital. Something flickered in Rachel's eyes. Why that house? I've seen a dog watching it 3 days in a row, the same dong, same position, staring at the house like it's waiting for something. A dog? She sounded disappointed, as if she'd expected something more substantial. A German shepherd, well-trained, the kind used in canine units. He paused. I used to be a canine handler. I know working dogs. This one is fixated on that house for a reason. Rachel was quiet for a moment. 2 months ago, one of our kids, Tyler Green, 10 years old, told me something strange. He said he'd seen men taking children into the scary house at night. I thought he was having nightmares. The Wilson house? He didn't call it that. He just said it was big and old and looked like a monster. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. He drew this. The drawing was crude, childish, but unmistakably the Victorian silhouette of the Wilson house. Dark windows like eyes, a mouth like door, and small stack figures being led inside by larger ones. A week later, Tyler was gone. Ran away. His file now says he had a history of fabricating stories and running off. It didn't say that before. David studied the drawing. Did you tell Martinez about this? Yes, he said children have active imaginations. That Tyler probably ran away because he was afraid of getting in trouble for lying. Her voice hardened. Tyler was scared of something, but it wasn't getting in trouble for lying. The owner of the Wilson house is William Holloway. Does that name mean anything to you? Rachel nodded. He's on our board of directors, major donor, visits the facility about once a month to check on his investment, as he calls it. She paused. Always seems very interested in our new arrivals, especially the ones without family. Pieces were falling into place, forming a picture David didn't want to see. Children without connections, a man with resources and access, a house with history. The dog is trying to tell us something, he said more to himself than to Rachel. It knows what's happening in that house. She gave him a skeptical look. You're basing this on a dog staring at a building? I'm basing it on 15 years as a detective, including 5 with the K-9 unit. David stood. I need to see inside that house. You'd need a warrant. I need probable cause for a warrant. Right now, all I have is a hunch and a dog. Rachel hesitated, then reached into her bag. Maybe this will help. She handed him a small plastic bag containing a torn piece of fabric. I found this caught on the fence behind the home last week, after Jamie disappeared. It's from her nightgown, the one she was wearing when she vanished. David examined the fabric, pink cotton with a unicorn print, smeared with something dark. Is this blood? I think so, but that's not all. Rachel pointed to a corner of the fabric. Look closely. David squinted. Tiny stitches, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for them. Someone had sewn something into the hem. I haven't opened it, Rachel said. I thought it might be evidence. Evidence. The word hung between them. If there was a message hidden in the fabric, if the blood was Jamie's, if it could be linked to the Wilson house, that might be enough for a warrant. But the chain of custody was already broken. Rachel had found it, kept it, handed it over informally. Any decent lawyer would get it thrown out. Still, it was something, more than he'd had this morning. I need to get this tested, he said, unofficially for now. Rachel nodded. There's something else. Every month, Holloway selects certain children for what he calls special therapy sessions. They leave the facility for a day or two. When they come back, they're different, quieter, more compliant. Different how? Like something inside them has been switched off. Her voice wavered slightly. Jamie was selected the week before she disappeared. The cold feeling spread through David's sweat. Who approves these sessions? The director, Dr. Simmons. He says it's an honor to be chosen for Holloway's mentorship program. And no one questions this? Anyone who does, doesn't last long at the home. We're always understaffed, underfunded. Holloway's donations keep the lights on. David pocketed the fabric sample. I need to see inside that house. How? You said yourself you don't have enough for a warrant. He thought of the bomb, the gap beneath the window, the freshly disturbed earth. I'm going to follow a lead, he said carefully. If I find something concrete, I'll get a warrant. Until then, keep your head down. Don't let anyone know you've spoken to me. Rachel looked at him with wary hope. Do you really think there's something to this? Or am I just paranoid? David thought of the dog's unwavering focus, the coincidences that were becoming too numerous to be coincidences, the children who vanished without trace. I think, he said slowly, that sometimes paranoia is just paying attention. Night fell early in November. By 6 p.m., Mason Creek was dark, street lights casting pools of yellow across empty sidewalks. Most businesses had closed. Most residents were home for the evening. David drove his personal vehicle, a weathered Jeep Cherokee, past the Wilson house. No lights, no movement, no sign of the black SUV he'd seen earlier. The German Shepherd was still there, still watching. He parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows for cover. The temperature had dropped. His breath formed clouds in the darkness. The dog acknowledged him with a glance, then returned to its vigil. We're going to figure this out, David murmured, crouching beside the animal. You and me. The shepherd's ears twitched. Slowly, deliberately, it rose and padded toward the side of the house, the same route as before to the partially excavated window well. David followed, flashlight in hand but unlit. Better to preserve his night vision, better to remain unseen. At the window, the dog began digging again, enlarging the gap beneath the frame. David joined in, using his hands to clear away soil and debris. The opening grew wider. "Good enough for you to get through," he whispered, "but not me." The dog looked at him, then at the gap, then back at him. Unmistakable communication. "You want me to follow you? I can't fit." The shepherd whined softly, then squeezed through the gap, disappearing into the darkness of the house. David cursed under his breath. He couldn't follow, couldn't abandon the animal, couldn't leave without learning what was inside. A different window then, one less secure. He circled the house, testing each ground floor window, all securely boarded. At the back, the kitchen door was reinforced with a metal security gate. The original door behind it appeared intact but solid. No easy entry, not without tools that would make noise, leave evidence. A soft bark drew his attention. The dog had reappeared at the window, something clutched in its jaws. David knelt. "What have you got, boy?" The shepherd pushed its head through the lamp, dropping the object into David's outstretched hand. A child's sock, small, white with pink stripes, stained with what looked like mud or blood. David examined it carefully. Mass-produced, no distinctive markings, but tangible evidence that a child had been inside a building that should have been empty for decades. The dog disappeared again before David could stop it. He waited, minutes stretching painfully, before the shepherd returned with a second item. A hair ribbon. Blue, frayed at the edges, also stained. "Good boy," David whispered. "What else is in there?" The dog whined, unable to communicate what it had seen, but clearly distressed. David made a decision. This was enough for a warrant, or would be if he'd obtained it legally. But entering an abandoned building without authorization, removing items without a chain of custody, none of it would stand up in court. He needed to do this by the book, needed unimpeachable evidence. "Stay here," he told the dog. "I'm coming back with help." The shepherd whined again but remained at the window as David retreated. Back in his Jeep, he called Coleman's personal number. "It's Lynch. I need to talk to you, now, in person." "It's almost 7 p.m., David. I'm at home." "This can't wait." A pause. "Fine. Meet me at O'Malley's in 20 minutes. O'Malley's was a cop bar on the edge of town. Dark wood, neon beer signs, the kind of place where badges were never shown but always present. Coleman was waiting in a corner booth, a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him. His expression was a mixture of concern and irritation. "This better be good, Lynch." David placed the child's sock and hair ribbon on the table between them. "Found these inside the Wilson house, the condemned property I mentioned. I believe they belong to missing children from the Mason Creek Children's Home." Coleman stared at the items, then at David. "You broke into a private residence without a warrant?" "I didn't enter the building. I found these items outside near a partially open window." Not technically a lie. He had found them outside, after the dog brought them out. Coleman picked up the sock, examining it carefully. "This could belong to anyone. There's no ID, no way to connect it to a specific missing child. It was inside an abandoned building that should have been empty for decades. Or it could have been dropped by some kid exploring a haunted house on a dare." Coleman set the sock down. "What do you really have, David, beyond these items that could have a dozen innocent explanations?" David leaned forward. "The property owner is William Holloway, former director of the psychiatric hospital that operated there until 2003, current board member and major donor to the children's home where 12 kids have vanished in 3 years." Coleman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Go on." "Holloway was accused of conducting unethical experiments on children in the hospital before it closed. The investigation was inconclusive, but the facility shut down. Now he has access to vulnerable children through the home. That's circumstantial at best. I spoke with an employee at the children's home. She says Holloway personally selects certain children for special therapy sessions away from the facility. The most recent child to disappear, Jamie Miller, had just returned from one of these sessions before she vanished." Coleman was silent for a long moment. "Who's this employee?" David hesitated. Giving Rachel's name might put her at risk. "I can't say. They're afraid of retaliation." "So your evidence is items that could have come from anywhere, a connection between Holloway and the children's home that isn't secret or illegal, and the word of an anonymous source." Coleman shook his head. "No judge will grant a warrant on that." "What about the blood?" "What blood?" David removed the plastic bag containing the torn nightgown fragment. This was found near the children's home the night Jamie Miller disappeared. It has what appears to be blood on it and something hidden in the hem. Coleman examined the fabric. And where did you get this? From my source at the home. So again, chain of custody is broken. Inadmissible. David felt frustration building. Something is happening in that house. Children are disappearing. Holloway is involved. I need to get inside, find concrete evidence. Based on what? A hunch? Items that could have innocent explanations? The word of someone who won't come forward officially. Coleman's voice softened. David, I know you're looking for redemption after what happened with the collector. But this isn't the way. This isn't about redemption. It's about children in danger. If you really believe that, do it right. Build a case properly. Get evidence that will stand up in court. And while I'm doing that, how many more kids disappear? Coleman sighed. I can't authorize a search based on what you've shown me. I'm sorry. David gathered the items, returning them to his pocket. Then I'll find more evidence. Do it by the book, Lynch. I'm giving you leeway because of our history, but if you break into that house without a warrant, I can't protect you. David left without responding. In the parking lot, the cold air did little to cool his frustration. Coleman was right, legally, but every instinct told him children were in that house. Now, tonight. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Another child missing. Timothy Baker, 9 years old, reported 30 minutes ago. Another one. While he sat collecting evidence, building a case by the book, another child had vanished. Decision made, David drove back toward the Wilson house. To hell with warrants, to hell with admissible evidence. If children were inside that house, he was getting them out tonight. The German Shepherd was gone when he returned. The street was empty, silent except for the whisper of wind through bare branches. David circled to the back of the house, flashlight beam playing across the overgrown yard. At the kitchen door, he examined the security gate more carefully. Old, rusted at the hinges, probably installed when the hospital closed. He returned to his Jeep, retrieving a crowbar from the emergency kit in the trunk. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Back at the door, he worked the crowbar into the gap beside the lock, applying steady pressure. The metal groaned, resisted, then gave with a crack that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. The security gate swung open. Behind it, the original door was solid wood, but weathered by years of exposure. The lock was a simple deadbolt, probably original to the house. Another application of the crowbar. Another crack. The door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. David paused, listening. No sound, no movement. He clicked on his flashlight, stepping cautiously inside. The kitchen was a time capsule of institutional design. Industrial sink, commercial stove, long cold. Metal cabinets with peeling paint. The air was stale, thick with dust, and the faint musty smell of abandonment. But something else lingered beneath those expected odors. Something sharper. Chemical. Like cleaning solutions or disinfectant. The beam of David's flashlight caught something on the floor. Footprints in the dust. Recent. Multiple sets, including small ones that could only belong to children. David moved deeper into the house, following the prints. They led through a swinging door into what had once been a dining hall. Long tables, metal chairs pushed neatly against them, as if awaiting the next meal service. The footprints continued across the room, toward a doorway on the far side. David followed, every sense alert for movement or sound. The next room had been a reception area. Desk, filing cabinets, a sign on the wall, letters partially obscured by grime. Mason Creek Children's Psychiatric Hospital. Healing minds, restoring lives. The footprints diverged here. Some continued toward the front of the house. Others turned down a hallway to the left. David followed the latter, moving deeper into the building's interior. The hallway was lined with doors, patient rooms, according to small metal plaques. Each room identical. Bed frame, desk, chair. Window with heavy bars. The institutional uniformity was unsettling. At the end of the hallway, a set of double doors. Beyond them, a larger space. What might have been a common area or therapy room. Chairs arranged in a circle. One wall covered with a faded mural of woodland creatures, their painted eyes following his movement across the room. The footprints led to another door. This one newer than the others. Steel with a reinforced frame, the kind used in high security areas, the kind used to keep people in. It wasn't locked. Not anymore. The mechanism had been disabled, the door held closed only by its own weight. David pushed it open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Concrete steps, metal handrail. At the bottom, another door. This one closed. He paused, listening. Nothing. Not even the settling sounds common in old buildings. Just silence and the faint echo of his own breathing. The stairs were dusty except for a clear path down the center. More evidence of recent use. David descended slowly, testing each step before putting his full weight on it. At the bottom, he examined the door. Like the one above, it was steel, designed for security. Unlike the one above, this one had an active electronic lock. A keypad glowed faintly in the darkness. Someone had retrofitted modern security to an ancient building. David studied the keypad. No way to bypass it without specialized equipment. No way to guess the code. A soft whine came from behind him. He turned, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The German shepherd stood at the top of the stairs watching him. "How did you get in?" David whispered. The dog descended the stairs, moving past him to the door. It sat, looking expectantly at the keypad. "I can't open it. I don't have the code." The shepherd stood, placing its paws on the door just beneath the keypad. Its nails scraped against the metal, making a distinct pattern of sounds. 4 scratches. Pause. 2 scratches. Pause. 3 scratches. Pause. 1 scratch. David stared, understanding, dawning. "The code? You know the code?" The dog repeated the pattern. 4, 2, 3, 1. Worth a try. David punched the numbers into the keypad. 4, 2, 3, 1. A soft beep. A click. The door unlocked. "Good boy," David breathed. "How did you learn that?" The shepherd merely looked at him, amber eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. David pushed the door open, revealing a corridor beyond. Unlike the decaying hospital above, this area was clean, well-maintained. The walls were painted a sterile white. The floor was polished concrete. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Motion activated by their entry. The institutional smell was stronger here. Disinfectant, antiseptic, the unmistakable scent of a medical facility. Doors lined the corridor, metal, with small observation windows set at eye level. Each had a number stenciled on it. Each had an electronic lock similar to the one on the main door. David moved to the first door, peering through the window. A small room beyond. Bed, desk, chair, like the patient rooms upstairs but modernized, sterile, empty. He checked the second door. Another room, identical to the first. Also empty. The third room was different. The observation window was covered from the inside with what looked like paper or cloth. David couldn't see in. The dog growled softly, hackles rising as it stared at the door. "Someone in there," David whispered. The shepherd pawed at the door, whining urgently. This lock required a key card, not a code. No way to bypass it without specialized equipment. Or brute force. David weighed his options. Breaking down the door would make noise, alert anyone else in the facility. But if a child was inside, decision made. He positioned himself to kick near the lock, where the door would be weakest. The first impact shuddered through his leg, the door holding firm. The second produced a cracking sound as the frame began to give. The third sent the door flying inward, the lock mechanism tearing free from the wall. The room beyond was dark. David swept his flashlight across the space, revealing a scene that froze the blood in his veins. A child lay on the bed, small, thin, wrists and ankles secured with padded restraints. An IV stand beside the bed, tubing running to a needle in the child's arm. Monitoring equipment beeped softly, displaying vital signs. The child's eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing. A boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old. Dark hair, pale skin made paler by the harsh light. Timothy Baker. The child reported missing just hours ago. The dog pushed past David, moving to the bedside. It whined softly, nudging the boy's hand with its nose. No response. The child's eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, his breathing shallow but regular. David moved quickly to the bed, checking the restraints. Medical grade, secure but not tight enough to cause injury, designed to immobilize without harm. Timothy, can you hear me? I'm Detective Lynch. I'm here to help you. Nothing, not even a flicker of recognition. David examined the IV bag. No label, clear fluid dripping steadily into the tube. Sedative probably, keeping the child compliant. He was reaching to remove the needle when a sound from the corridor froze him in place. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving quickly. They'd been discovered. The dog growled, positioning itself between David and the door, ready to defend. David drew his weapon, crouching beside the bed, using it for cover. Through the broken door, he could see shadows moving in the corridor. Flashlight beams swept across the walls. "Police! I'm armed!" he called out. "I have a child in protective custody." The footsteps stopped. A voice responded, one David recognized with a jolt of surprise. "Lynch, what the hell are you doing here?" Officer Gabriel Martinez, the cop assigned to the missing children cases. The one who had dismissed every concern, filed every report as a routine runaway. "Martinez, why are you here?" No answer, just the shuffle of movement as positions were adjusted in the corridor. "I found Timothy Baker," David called. "He's being held against his will, sedated. There may be others." More silence. Then Martinez's voice again, closer now. "You need to leave, Lynch. This isn't what you think it is." "It's exactly what I think it is. Child abduction, illegal detention, medical experimentation without consent, multiple counts of kidnapping and abuse. You don't understand what's happening here. I understand enough to know you're involved, that you've been covering up disappearances, that you're working with Holloway." A different voice responded, older, cultured, with the precise diction of someone accustomed to authority. "Detective Lynch, this is William Holloway. I believe we should discuss this situation like reasonable men." David tightened his grip on his weapon. "There's nothing reasonable about kidnapping children. These children are receiving treatment, advanced therapy for conditions that conventional medicine can't address. They're here voluntarily with the full knowledge and consent of their guardians. Guardians like you, the state-appointed custodian who's supposed to protect them?" Holloway's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "You see conspiracy where there is only compassion. These children are damaged, traumatized. Conventional therapies have failed them. We're helping them heal. By strapping them to beds, by drugging them unconscious, a necessary part of the process. The sedation prevents trauma during neural restructuring." The clinical language sent a chill through David. Neural restructuring? A revolutionary approach to treating childhood trauma. The results have been remarkable. Children who were once violent, unpredictable, uncontrollable, transformed into functional, happy individuals. "You're experimenting on them. We're saving them." Holloway's voice hardened slightly. "As we tried to save you after your unfortunate experience with the collector." David's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" 2 years ago, after you lost your partner, after you failed to save that child, you were offered treatment, therapy sessions to help you process your trauma. You refused. Memory surfaced. The department psychologist recommending specialized therapy with an outside consultant. David had declined, preferring to handle his grief alone. "That was you? You were the consultant?" "I've helped many officers traumatized in the line of duty. Some more successfully than others." Holloway paused. "Your dog, your previous partner. Max, wasn't it? He died trying to save you, trying to compensate for your hesitation." The words struck like physical blows. How did Holloway know the details? How did he know about Max? "You've been observing me, monitoring a potential patient. Your trauma response was particularly interesting. Self-isolation, avoidance of canine units, recurring nightmares, classic PTSD with specific phobic elements." David's mind raced. This wasn't just about the missing children. This was about him too. He had been evaluated, categorized, perhaps even targeted. "How many children are in this facility?" Holloway sighed as if disappointed by the change of subject. "Currently 23, all receiving treatment tailored to their specific needs." 23. Not just the 12 from the children's home, more from other facilities, other jurisdictions. And the ones who don't respond to treatment, what happens to them? Silence, then. Not everyone can be saved, detective. Some damage is too profound for repair. The implications turned David's stomach. You're going to surrender yourself and release these children. Now. Holloway's laugh was genuine this time. I think not. Officer Martinez, please explain the situation to Detective Lynch. Martinez's voice was closer now, just outside the broken door. Lynch, you're outgunned and outnumbered. You have no backup, no warrant, and you've committed multiple crimes to get here. Breaking and entering, destruction of private property, interference with a legitimate medical facility. Medical facility? This is a torture chamber. These children are prisoners. They're patients, and you're trespassing. David could see Martinez's shadow now, just beyond the doorway. How long have you been helping him, Martinez? How many reports have you falsified? How many children have you handed over? I've been doing what's necessary, what the system was too weak to do. And what's that? Fixing broken children, the ones no one wants. The ones who would age out of the system and become burdens on society. Holloway gives them purpose, structure, a future. As what? Lab rats? Slaves? Martinez stepped into view, weapon drawn but held at his side. As functional human beings, you should see the ones who graduate from the program. Calm, controlled, obedient. They make perfect wards of the state, some even get adopted. After you've erased who they were. After we've removed the trauma that made them unmanageable. Martinez's expression was earnest, as if he genuinely believed in what he was saying. It's mercy, Lynch. More merciful than letting them grow up damaged, unwanted. The German Shepherd growled, sensing the threat posed by Martinez. The officer glanced at the animal, his expression hardening. That dog, it's been causing problems for weeks, ever since it escaped during a procedure. Understanding dawned. This is your dog? One of your experiments? A failed one. We were testing a new approach, using animals as psychological anchors for the children. This one formed too strong a bond with its primary subject. Became protective. Uncontrollable. David looked at the shepherd, seeing it with new eyes. Not just a stray, not just a random dog with strange behavior. A rescue dog, trained to help children, then experimented on, and now trying to save those it had been bonded with. What happened to the child it was bonded to? Martinez's hesitation told David everything. You killed a child, and its dog escaped to try to save the others. The shepherd's growl deepened, its focus entirely on Martinez now. The officer raised his weapon slightly. That animal is dangerous. It needs to be put down. The only dangerous animals here are the ones experimenting on children. David shifted position, maintaining cover while keeping his weapon trained on Martinez. I'm leaving with Timothy and the dog. Then I'm coming back with a full tactical team to free the others. You won't make it out of this basement, Lynch. Then neither will you. Standoff. David behind the bed, weapon ready. Martinez in the doorway, similarly armed. The shepherd between them, a living barrier of muscle and teeth. Behind Martinez, David could see other figures moving in the corridor. Security personnel, probably. 3, maybe 4. Bad odds. The dog sensed his thoughts, glancing back at him briefly before returning its attention to Martinez. In that moment, David felt again the connection he had once shared with Max, the silent communication between handler and working dog. A plan formed. Last chance, Martinez. Stand down. You know I can't do that. David nodded almost imperceptibly. Shadow, go! The shepherd exploded into motion, launching itself at Martinez with a ferocity that sent the officer staggering backward. Not biting, not yet, but using its body weight to unbalance and distract. In the same instant, David moved, grabbing Timothy from the bed, IV and all. The boy was light, too light for his age, wasted by whatever had been done to him. The corridor erupted in shouts and confusion as Martinez fought to control the dog. David used the chaos to slip through the doorway, turning away from the main entrance, deeper into the facility. Shadow, heel! The dog disengaged from Martinez, racing to David's side as they fled down the corridor. Behind them, voices shouted commands, Flashlight beams crisscrossed the walls. A gunshot cracked the air. The bullet whined past David's head, embedding itself in the wall ahead. No time to be careful now. David ran, the child in his arms, the dog at his side. The corridor ended at another security door, this one standing partially open. Beyond it, a larger space. Laboratory equipment, computers, monitoring stations, and more doors, more rooms like the one Timothy had been in. More children. David hesitated, one child in his arms, 22 others still captive. Could he save them all? Not alone, not now. He needed backup, needed to get Timothy to safety first. A door at the far end of the laboratory caught his attention, different from the others, heavy, with a push-bar mechanism. Emergency exit. He ran for it, shadow keeping pace. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Another shot, this one striking equipment near David's head, sending sparks and fragments of plastic flying. The exit door wasn't locked. Fire code regulations, even in a secret underground facility. David hit the push bar with his shoulder, the door swinging outward into the night. Cold air, stars overhead. They had emerged at the back of the property, near the tree line that separated the Wilson house from the undeveloped forest beyond. David ran. Timothy clutched against his chest, shadow running ahead as if scouting the path. Behind them, shouts and flashlight beams as their pursuers emerged from the building. The forest swallowed them. Darkness, trees, the crunch of fallen leaves beneath their feet. David moved as quickly as he dared, trying to put distance between them and their pursuers without risking a fall that could injure the child. Timothy remained unresponsive, a dead weight in David's arms. The IV had been pulled free in their escape, but whatever drug had been administered was still in his system. They needed to reach the road, needed to find help. But which way? Shadow seemed to know. The dog moved confidently through the trees, occasionally looking back to ensure David was following. They traveled for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. Finally, the tree line thinned. Ahead, the glow of streetlights, the road. David emerged from the forest, Timothy still cradled in his arms, Shadow at his side. The street was empty, silent, no sign of vehicles or pedestrians. His Jeep was blocks away, back near the front of the Wilson property. Too far, too risky. He needed to call for help, needed to alert Coleman, get a tactical team to the Wilson house before Holloway and Martinez could destroy evidence or move the remaining children. But his phone was gone, lost in the chase or the forest, and Timothy needed medical attention. Decision made, David moved toward the nearest house, a small ranch-style home with lights glowing in the windows. Shadow followed, alert for any sign of pursuit. At the door, David shifted Timothy to free one hand, then pounded on the wood. "Police! Emergency! I need to use your phone!" Seconds passed, then the porch light flicked on and the door opened a crack, secured by a chain. An elderly man peered out cautiously. "What's going on?" David held up his badge with his free hand. "Detective David Lynch, Mason Creek Police. This child needs medical attention, and I need to call for backup. Please." The man hesitated, eyes moving from David to the unconscious child to the German shepherd standing guard beside them. "What happened to the boy?" "He was kidnapped, drugged. There are more children in danger. Please, I need your phone now." Something in David's voice, the urgency, the raw truth, convinced the man. He closed the door long enough to remove the chain, then opened it fully. "Come in. Phone's in the kitchen." David carried Timothy inside, laying him gently on the sofa. "Keep an eye on him. If he wakes up, keep him calm. Tell him he's safe." The man nodded, clearly shocked but responding to the crisis. In the kitchen, David grabbed the phone, dialing Coleman's number from memory. "Coleman, it's Lynch. I'm at—" David looked around, finding a piece of mail on the counter. 1478 Pine Street. "I have Timothy Baker, the missing boy. He's alive but unconscious. Drugged." "David, what the hell?" "Listen to me. William Holloway is running an illegal medical facility in the basement of the Wilson house. 23 children are being held there against their will. Martinez is involved. He's been covering up the disappearances, helping Holloway select victims." "Martinez? Our Martinez?" "Yes, he's armed and on site. There are others, security personnel, medical staff. They're experimenting on the children, Coleman. Some kind of neural restructuring, mind control. A pause, then Coleman's voice deadly serious. Are you certain? I've seen it. I've got one of the children. They shot at us as we escaped. I'm mobilizing tactical now. Ambulance to your location for the boy. Stay where you are, Lynch. Do not go back to that house. There are 22 more kids in there, Coleman, and we'll get them out, but you've done your part. Stay with the boy. Protect him. That's an order. David wanted to argue, wanted to return to the Wilson house and free every child himself. But Timothy needed him, and Tactical would do a better job with a coordinated assault than he could alone. Understood, but hurry. They know I've escaped. They'll be destroying evidence, maybe moving the children. ETA 5 minutes to your location, 15 to the Wilson house. Hang tight. The call ended. David returned to the living room where the elderly man was watching Timothy with concern. Ambulance is on the way, David told him. Thank you for your help. What kind of monster drugs a child? The man asked quietly. David had no answer. He checked Timothy's pulse, steady but slow. The boy's breathing was shallow but regular. He would live, but what had been done to his mind remained to be seen. Shadow sat beside the sofa, head resting near Timothy's hand, watching over him. The dog's loyalty, its determination to save the children it had been bonded with, struck David deeply. Good boy, he murmured. You did it. You led me to the... The shepherd's amber eyes met his, and in that moment, David felt the weight of the past 2 years begin to lift. He hadn't been able to save Max, hadn't been able to save that child from the collector. But today, with this dog's help, he had saved Timothy Baker, and soon they would save the others. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Help was coming. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. David stood at the window, peering through the curtains, watching for both the ambulance and any sign of pursuit. Shadow remained by Timothy, motionless except for the occasional turn of his head when a sound caught his attention. The elderly man, who had introduced himself as Frank Harmon, retired school teacher, hovered nearby, uncertain how to help. Been living in Mason Creek my whole life, Frank said quietly. Never thought something like this could happen here. That Wilson house, though, always gave me the creeps, even back when it was a hospital. Did you know Holloway? David asked, still watching the street. Oh, sure, everybody did. Dr. Holloway was a big deal around here in the old days. Pioneering work, they called it. Helping troubled kids. But there were always rumors. What kind of rumors? Frank hesitated. The kind folks don't talk about in polite company. Kids who went in one way and came out different. Not better, just compliant. My wife was a nurse at the general hospital. Said they'd get transfers from the psychiatric center sometimes. Children with strange injuries they couldn't explain. Burns, needle marks. Once, a boy with a surgical incision that no one at Wilson would account for. David turned from the window. Did anyone investigate? Back then, in the 80s and 90s? Those kids were from the system, detective. Wards of the state. Nobody important. Nobody with resources to push for answers. Frank's weathered face showed the regret of a man who'd lived long enough to look back and wish he'd done more. By the time people started asking real questions, it was too late. The damage was done. The wail of sirens grew louder, then stopped. Blue and red lights flashed across the curtains. Through the window, David could see an ambulance and 2 patrol cars pulling up to the curb. They're here. Frank moved to the door, opening it as paramedics hurried up the walk with a stretcher. Behind them, 2 uniformed officers, Jenkins and Torres from the K-9 unit. David felt a stab of relief at seeing familiar, trusted faces. The paramedics moved immediately to Timothy, checking vital signs, shining lights in his unresponsive eyes. Torres approached David, concern etched on her features. Lynch, Coleman filled us in. You okay? Fine, but the boy's been drugged, heavily, and there are 22 more like him at the Wilson house. Tactical's on the way. 10 minutes out. Torres glanced at Shadow, who watched the proceedings with alert interest. This the dog Coleman mentioned? Yeah, he's the one who found them. Led me to the house. He was one of their experiments, too. Torres's eyes widened. Jesus. Jenkins joined them, notepad in hand. We need your statement, Lynch. Everything you saw in there. David nodded, watching as the paramedics transferred Timothy to the stretcher. I'll tell you everything, but first, I need to show Tactical exactly where to go. That facility is a maze, and they'll be moving the children, destroying evidence. Coleman said you're to stay here. Wait for him. While 22 kids remain in danger? No way. Jenkins and Torres exchanged looks. They knew David, knew his reputation from before. Stubborn, dedicated, unwilling to back down when lives were at stake. Coleman's orders, Lynch. David felt frustration rising. Every minute wasted in debate was a minute Holloway could use to cover his tracks. Shadow seemed to sense his agitation, moving to his side, pressing against his leg. Then arrest me, otherwise I'm going. Another exchange of glances. Then Torres sighed. We'll take you, our car, but you stay behind Tactical when we get there. No heroics. Relief flooded through him. Agreed. As the paramedics wheeled Timothy toward the ambulance, David knelt beside Shadow. Ready to go back, boy? To help the others? The shepherd's ears perked forward, his posture straightening. Ready. Frank stood in the doorway as they prepared to leave. Detective, those children, will they be all right? David wished he could offer reassurance. We'll get them out. What happens after that? He shook his head. One step at a time. The elderly man nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. Some damage couldn't be undone. Some wounds never fully healed. The patrol car sped through the empty streets of Mason Creek, lights flashing, but sirens silent. No need to announce their approach. Torres drove while Jenkins coordinated with Tactical over the radio. David sat in the back with Shadow, going over the layout of the Wilson House basement in his mind, trying to remember every detail. Tactical's 2 minutes out, Jenkins reported. They'll secure the perimeter, then breach on Coleman's command. They need to know about the laboratory, David said. It's on the lower level, behind a security door with a keypad. That's where they'll be keeping most of the children. I'll relay that. As they approached Miller Road, David tensed. The Wilson house loomed ahead, still dark, still seemingly abandoned. But now he knew what lurked beneath its decaying exterior. The cruelty. The warped vision masked as therapy. The patrol car slowed, pulling up behind a line of tactical vehicles parked a block away. Men in body armor moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, securing communications. David spotted Coleman directing operations from the command vehicle. The sergeant looked up as they approached, his expression a mixture of relief and irritation. Lynch, I thought I told you to stay put. I'm the only one who's been inside. You need me. Coleman looked like he wanted to argue, but practicality won out. Fine, tell me what we're walking into. David quickly outlined the facility's layout, the main entrance through the kitchen, the stairwell to the basement, the security door with the keypad, the laboratory beyond with its rows of containment rooms. The code for the security door is 4231, but they might have changed it by now. Martinez is in there, along with Holloway and at least 3 or 4 security personnel, all armed. And the children? Sedated, restrained to beds, at least one in every room I saw. 23 total, according to Holloway. I got one out. Timothy Baker. Coleman nodded, absorbing the information. And the dog? Torres says it led you there. Shadow. He was part of their experiments. They were using dogs as psychological anchors for the children. This one escaped, kept returning to the house, trying to get the others out. Smart animal. Smarter than we've been. He's been trying to tell us about this place for weeks. Coleman's face darkened with self-recrimination. We should have listened sooner. He turned to the tactical commander. We go in 5 minutes. Primary objective is the rescue of the children. Secondary is the apprehension of Holloway and Martinez. I want clean entry, room-by-room clearing. These kids are going to be terrified enough without us adding to it. The commander nodded, relaying the orders to his team. Coleman turned back to David. You stay here. You've done your part. I need to be there. Shadow knows the layout better than any of us. He can lead your team straight to the children. Coleman looked at the shepherd, considering. Can you control him? Guarantee he won't interfere with the operation? Yes. A long pause as Coleman weighed the risks. All right, but you stay with the rear team. Shadow can guide them, but you don't enter until the building is secured. Clear? Clear. The minutes dragged as Tactical made their final preparations. David knelt beside Shadow, running his hand over the dog's fur, feeling the tension in the animal's muscles. The shepherd was focused on the house, ears forward, body poised for action. "We're going to get them out," David murmured. "All of them." Shadow's eyes flicked to him briefly, then back to the house. Waiting. Coleman's voice came over the radio. "All teams in position. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, go." The operation unfolded with the precision of long training. Tactical teams converged on the house from multiple directions, using breaching tools to force entry through doors and windows. No sirens, no shouted warnings, just the controlled urgency of professionals who understood that lives hung in the balance. David and Shadow followed the rear team, staying back as ordered. From his position, David could see flashlight beams moving through the house, hear the muffled sounds of rooms being cleared. Then the radio crackled. Basement entrance secured, moving to level 2. Level 2, the underground facility, where the children were kept. More radio chatter, the security door, the keypad, the code working, the team spreading out through the laboratory area. First subject located, female juvenile, approximately 10 years old, unconscious but breathing. Second subject located, male juvenile, approximately 12, same condition. The reports continued, each one a small victory, each one a child found alive. Then, "We have resistance. East corridor. Armed suspects, barricaded with multiple subjects. Holloway, Martinez, making their last stand." David tensed, wanting to rush in to help. Shadow whined softly, picking up on his agitation. "Negotiation underway," came the update. "Suspects demanding safe passage in exchange for the children." Coleman's voice firm. "No deals. Those children come out now, or we come in." Silence stretched over the radio, minutes passing like hours, then a single word: surrender. Relief washed through David. It was over. No more shots fired, no more children endangered. The radio crackled again. "All suspects in custody, all subjects accounted for. Medical teams cleared to enter." 23 children. Just as Holloway had said, all alive, all found. Coleman approached, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling on his weathered face. "It's done. They're all coming out now." David nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Shadow pressed against his leg, a warm, solid presence grounding him in the moment. "You were right," Coleman said quietly. "About all of it. The house, the kids, Holloway, Martinez. You were right, and I didn't listen. I didn't have proof, not the kind that would stand up. Still, I should have trusted your instincts." Coleman paused. "You saved them, Lynch, you and that dog." They watched as the children began to emerge from the house, carried by tactical officers and paramedics. Small, pale figures, wrapped in blankets, loaded into waiting ambulances. Some stirring, confused. Others still unconscious. "What Holloway was doing to them," David said. "The neural restructuring. Will they recover?" Coleman's expression was grim. "The doctors don't know yet. Some of these kids have been in there for months. Years, maybe. Whatever was done to them. It's going to be a long road back." A figure appeared in the doorway of the house, escorted by 2 officers, William Holloway. Handcuffed but still dignified, still carrying himself with the authority of a man used to deference. His eyes scanned the scene until they found David. Even from a distance, David could see the man smile. Not defeat, not regret. Something else. Something that sent a chill down his spine. Recognition. As if this too had been part of some grand experiment. Behind Holloway came Martinez, head down, avoiding the eyes of his former colleagues. The officer who had betrayed his oath, who had helped kidnap children, who had covered up disappearances, who had believed he was doing the right thing. As they were loaded into separate patrol cars, David felt Shadow tense beside him. The shepherd's attention was fixed on one of the ambulances, where paramedics were loading a small figure. "What is it, boy?" Shadow whined, a sound of distress and recognition. Then he was moving, pulling away from David, trotting toward the ambulance. David followed, catching up as the dog reached the vehicle. Inside, a girl of about 7 lay on a stretcher. Thin, pale, dark hair splayed across the pillow. Her eyes were open but vacant, staring at nothing. Shadow whined again, pressing his muzzle against the edge of the stretcher. The paramedic glanced at David. "Your dog?" He knows her. The paramedic nodded, understanding. He can have a minute. We need to transport soon, though. David watched as Shadow gently nudged the girl's limp hand. No response. The dog tried again, a soft whine escaping his throat. Then, almost imperceptibly, the girl's fingers twitched. Her vacant eyes shifted, focusing briefly on the shepherd. Ma. The word was barely audible, a breath more than a voice. But it was there. A name. The dog's name, perhaps. Or her own. A fragment of memory breaking through the chemical haze. Shadow's tail wagged once, slowly, hopefully. I think she remembers him, the paramedic said quietly. That's a good sign. A good sign. A small victory in a night of horror and redemption. David placed his hand on Shadow's head. You did good, boy. You did real good. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, David felt a strange mixture of emotions washing through him. Relief that the children were safe, anguish at what had been done to them, grief for what they had lost, and something else, something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Purpose. Coleman approached, radio in hand. The techs are going through the lab now, computers, records. They're finding... Christ, Lynch. This has been going on for years, decades maybe, not just here, other facilities, other towns. Holloway had a network? Looks that way. Doctors, administrators, people in child services, all feeding him children they deemed problematic, all participating in his research. The scope of it was staggering. Not just one man's madness, but a system, a conspiracy of silence and complicity that had allowed children to disappear, to be experimented on, to be broken and remade according to someone else's vision of what they should be. We need to track down every child who ever passed through his hands, David said. Not just the ones we found tonight. All of them. See if they can be helped. Coleman nodded. It's going to be a massive investigation. Federal, probably. I want you on it, Lynch. David looked down at Shadow, who sat watching the departing ambulances, alert, impatient. Both of us? Both of you. I'm reinstating you to full duty, effective immediately. And if you want, Shadow can be officially assigned as your K-9 partner. After proper certification, of course. The offer struck David to his core. Return to the K-9 unit. A new partner. A chance to do what he'd once loved, what he'd been good at before loss and guilt had consumed him. I'll think about it. Do that. Coleman clapped him on the shoulder. But for now, go home. Get some rest. There's going to be a lot of questions tomorrow. Press, internal affairs, the whole circus. Rest seemed impossible. Too much adrenaline, too many images burned into his memory. The children strapped to beds. Holloway's smug confidence. Martinez's twisted justifications. I'll try. As Coleman walked away, David knelt beside Shadow. The shepherd met his gaze, amber eyes reflecting the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. What do you say, boy? Want to come home with me tonight? Shadow's ears perked forward, his tail wagged once, not the frantic happiness of a normal dog, but the measured response of an animal who had seen too much, who understood more than most humans gave credit for. I'll take that as a yes. The ride home was silent, David driving, Shadow in the passenger seat, both exhausted, both processing the night's events in their own way. The streets were empty, the town unaware of the horror that had been uncovered, the children who had been rescued. Tomorrow, it would be news. Holloway's name would be tarnished. Martinez would be branded a traitor. The Wilson house would become infamous. Parents would hold their children closer. Teachers would watch their students more carefully. The community would search for signs they had missed, warnings they had ignored. But tonight, in the quiet of his car, David found himself thinking not of the villains, but of the survivors. 23 children who would wake tomorrow to a world they barely remembered, to lives that had been interrupted, to futures that had been altered without their consent, and a dog who had refused to abandon them, who had kept vigil, who had found help. As they pulled up to his apartment building, David glanced at Shadow. You saved them, you know that, right? None of this happens without you. The shepherd looked at him, eyes reflecting the streetlight's glow, then turned his gaze back to the road ahead, ever vigilant, ever watchful. David smiled, feeling something shift inside him. A crack in the wall of grief and guilt he'd built around his heart. A small opening, letting in the first faint light of healing. Yeah, he said softly. I know the feeling. The apartment felt different with shadow in it, less empty, less a shrine to past failures and more a space for new beginnings. David moved through his evening routine mechanically. Feed a makeshift bed of blankets on the floor, a bowl of water, his own meager dinner, a sandwich, a beer. Shadow explored the apartment cautiously, sniffing corners, examining furniture, mapping his new territory. He paused at the hook by the door where Max's collar still hung, studying it with peculiar intensity. That was my partner's, David said, watching the dog. Max. He died saving me. Shadow looked from the collar to David, a strange understanding in his eyes. You remind me of him, not just because you're both shepherds. It's something else, the way you focus, the way you don't give up. The dog padded over, sitting at David's feet, looking up at him with quiet expectation. You lost someone too, didn't you? That little girl, Emma. She was your person. Shadow's ears twitched at the name. We'll check on her. I promise. See how she's doing. For the first time in 2 years, David didn't dread sleep, didn't fear the nightmares that had haunted him since that night in the forest. With Shadow curled on the blankets beside his bed, David fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The ringing of his phone woke him, morning light filtering through the blinds, Shadow already alert, watching him. Lynch, Coleman's voice tight with controlled urgency. We've got a problem. Holloway's gone. David sat up, instantly awake. What do you mean gone? He was in custody. Transferred to county lockup. The transport never arrived. 2 officers down, both alive but critical. No sign of Holloway. Cold dread settled in David's stomach. How? Who? We're still piecing it together, but it looks like he had help, someone on the inside. Martinez? Still in custody, but he's not talking. And David, there's something else. The computers at the Wilson house, all wiped clean. No records, no patient files, nothing. The implications were clear. Holloway had contingency plans, people in place to help him escape, to erase evidence. The network Coleman had mentioned was still active, still protecting its own. What about the children? All accounted for, still at the hospital, under guard, but without those records, we don't know what was done to them, what drugs they were given, what procedures they underwent. David closed his eyes, processing. I'll be there in 20 minutes. No, not the station. The hospital. I want you with those kids. If Holloway tries to reclaim any of them, the thought was too horrible to complete. Understood. I'm on my way. As David dressed, Shadow watched from the doorway, alert, sensing the tension. Holloway escaped, David told him. We need to protect the children. The shepherd's posture changed instantly, hackles rising slightly, ears forward, muscles tensing. Ready. The Mason Creek General Hospital was a small facility, 3 stories of brick and glass on the edge of town. As David pulled into the parking lot, he noted the increased police presence, patrol cars at every entrance, uniformed officers checking IDs at the doors. Coleman met them in the lobby, his face drawn with fatigue and worry. Thanks for coming so quickly. We've got the kids on the pediatric floor. 3rd level, locked down, officers at every access point. How are they? David asked as they walked toward the elevators. Physically? Stable, dehydrated, malnourished in some cases, but alive. Mentally? Coleman shook his head. The doctors don't know what to make of it. Some are completely non-responsive. Others are awake, but vacant, like there's nobody home. A few are showing signs of awareness, recognition, but they're not talking. Not yet. And the girl, the one Shadow recognized? Emma Wilson, 7 years old, reported missing from a foster home in Burlington 8 months ago. Coleman glanced at the shepherd, who walked steadily beside David. She's one of the more responsive ones. Recognizes the dog, seems calmer when he's around, but she's not speaking, beyond that one word. The elevator doors opened onto the pediatric floor. The usual cheerful atmosphere of a children's ward was overshadowed by the gravity of the situation. Officers stationed at intervals along the corridor, medical staff moving quietly from room to room. Parents, foster parents, caseworkers, sitting in the waiting area, faces drawn with shock and guilt. How many had actual families looking for them? David asked quietly. Less than half. The rest were deep in the system. Multiple placements, behavioral issues, the kind of kids who fall through the cracks, the kind of kids no one would miss, the kind Holloway and his network could take with minimal risk. Where's Emma? Coleman led them to a room at the end of the corridor. Inside, a small figure lay in a hospital bed that seemed too large for her thin frame. Dark hair spread across the pillow, pale skin, eyes open but unfocused. An IV delivering fluids, monitoring equipment beeping softly. Shadow whined, pulling forward on his leash. David let him approach the bed. The shepherd gently pressed his muzzle against the girl's hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly her fingers curled around the dog's fur. Her vacant eyes shifted, focusing briefly on Shadow's face. Ma, the same word she had spoken the night before. Her name, a recognition of self that had survived whatever Holloway had done to her. I'll leave you with her, Coleman said quietly. Call if you need anything. And Lynch, be careful. We don't know who we can trust right now. As Coleman left, David pulled a chair beside the bed, watching as Shadow rested his head near Emma's hand, the contact seeming to comfort them both. Hey, Emma, David said softly. My name's David. I'm a police officer. You're safe now. No response. Just that vacant stare, those fingers gently twined in Shadow's fur. Shadow's been looking for you. He's a very brave dog, very smart. He led me to where you were being kept. Helped me get you out. Still nothing. But David continued, his voice low and steady, talking about inconsequential things. The weather, the view from her window, the kindness of the hospital staff, creating a gentle flow of normality in a situation that was anything but normal. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medication. Shadow remained at Emma's side, leaving only briefly when David took him outside for necessary breaks. In the late afternoon, a doctor entered, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Dr. Eleanor Walsh, according to her ID badge. Detective Lynch, I'm the pediatric neurologist assigned to these cases. David stood, shaking her hand. What can you tell me about their condition? Dr. Walsh sighed, checking Emma's chart before responding. Physically, they're recovering. The sedatives are clearing their systems. The malnutrition can be addressed. But the neurological damage, she hesitated. I've never seen anything like it. What did he do to them? From what we can tell without the missing records, some form of targeted neural suppression, areas of the brain associated with memory, emotion, decision-making, all showing abnormally low activity, as if they've been disconnected. Can it be reversed? I don't know. We're trying various therapies, stimulation techniques. The younger ones seem to be responding better. Their brains have more plasticity, more ability to form new pathways around the damaged areas. She glanced at Emma. This one, for instance, she's showing responsiveness to the dog. Recognition. That's a good sign. And the others? Walsh's expression darkened. Some may never fully recover, especially the ones who were there longer. Whatever Holloway was doing, he was systematically dismantling these children's sense of self, their autonomy, their will. Creating perfect wards of the state, David murmured, recalling Martinez's words. Compliant, controlled. Exactly, and without his records, without knowing exactly what drugs he used, what procedures he performed, we're working blind. She shook her head. I've requested consultations with specialists from Boston and New York. This is beyond anything we've dealt with before. After the doctor left, David sat in silence, watching Emma, watching Shadow. The bond between them was tangible, a connection that had somehow survived Holloway's attempts to break it. His phone buzzed. Coleman. Lynch, we've got a lead on Holloway. Security camera caught him at a gas station outside Burlington. He's heading north. State police are setting up roadblocks. Good. Keep me posted. Will do. How's it going there? David glanced at Emma, at Shadow. Slow. The neurologist doesn't know if they'll recover. Not fully. Coleman's sigh was audible. Christ, what kind of man does this to children? The kind who thinks he's right. The the kind who believes the end justifies the means. David paused. Did you find anything on his research? What he was trying to accomplish? Bits and pieces. From what we can tell, he was developing techniques to reprogram troubled children, make them more manageable, more adoptable. The ultimate solution to the foster care crisis, just remake the kids no one wants into kids everyone wants. The clinical detachment of it was chilling. Children as products to be modified, improved, made marketable. And the dogs? Where did Shadow fit in? That part's still unclear. Some kind of emotional anchor maybe? A control mechanism? We found kennels in the basement, equipment for animal training, but no records specific to that aspect of his work. David watched as Shadow shifted position, settling his head more comfortably against Emma's side. The girl's hand remained buried in his fur, her only connection to the world outside her damaged mind. I think I know, David said softly. I think the dogs were supposed to be the interface, the bridge between Holloway and the children. Something the kids would trust, would respond to, even after everything else was stripped away. Makes sense. Dogs are natural therapists, but this one turned on him. Because the bond works both ways. Shadow didn't just help Emma, she helped him. They protected each other. The conversation ended with promises to stay in touch, to share any developments. David returned to his vigil, to the quiet room with its beeping monitors and its two damaged souls finding comfort in each other's presence. Night fell. The hospital quieted. Staff changed shifts. Officers rotated positions. David dozed in the uncomfortable chair, waking at every sound, every change in the rhythm of the monitors. Shadow remained alert, head up, ears swiveling to track movements in the corridor outside. Sometime after midnight, a nurse entered. Young, male, unfamiliar. He moved to check Emma's IV, his back to David. Shadow growled, low, warning. David was instantly alert, hand moving to his weapon. Hospital ID, please. The nurse turned. His face was unremarkable, forgettable, but his eyes were cold, calculating. Of course, officer. He reached for his badge. Then in a fluid motion, produced a syringe instead. David lunged from his chair, drawing his weapon. Police, freeze! The man moved with unexpected speed, grabbing Emma from the bed, holding the syringe to her neck. The monitors wailed as connections were torn free. Back off, detective, or I finish what Dr. Holloway started. Shadow growled, a deep, menacing sound that filled the small room. The shepherd's muscles bunched, ready to spring. Let her go, David said, weapon steady. There's no way out of this hospital. The man smiled thinly. There's always a way out. Dr. Holloway makes sure of that. He backed toward the door, dragging Emma with him. The girl comes with me. She's too valuable to leave behind. A breakthrough case. Emma's eyes were open, but unfocused. Limp in the man's grasp, unresisting, unaware of the danger. Shadow, David said quietly. Stay. The shepherd froze, watching, waiting for the command. Smart, the false nurse said. Keep your dog in check. Now lower your weapon. David hesitated, calculating angles, risks. The syringe at Emma's neck. The man's finger on the plunger. Too dangerous to shoot. Too dangerous to let him leave with the girl. Why is she so important? David asked, stalling. What makes her a breakthrough case? She resisted longer than the others, maintained a sense of self despite the treatments. Dr. Holloway needs to understand why, to refine the process. So you can do this to more children. The man's expression didn't change. So we can help more children. Fix them, make them better. The same twisted logic Martinez had spouted. The same justifications. The belief that breaking a child and rebuilding them to your specifications was somehow an act of mercy. You're not taking her. I think I am. The man backed into the doorway, glancing quickly over his shoulder to check the corridor. Empty. The officer who should have been stationed there was nowhere in sight. In that moment of distraction, David acted. Shadow, go! The shepherd launched from his position beside the bed, a blur of muscle and fur. Not attacking. David's training still held, but moving to block the doorway, teeth bared, hackles raised. The man jerked back in surprise, his grip on Emma loosening slightly. David lunged, grabbing the wrist that held the syringe, forcing it away from the girl's neck. They struggled. The syringe fell, shattering on the floor. Emma slipped from the man's grasp, collapsing in a heap. Shadow circled, looking for an opening, for a way to help without endangering the child. The man was stronger than he looked, trained in some form of combat. He broke David's hold, landing a punch that sent the detective staggering back. Then he reached into his scrubs, producing a small caliber pistol. Enough games. A shot cracked the silence of the hospital room. David felt the bullet pass close enough to stir the air near his face. He dove for cover behind the bed as a second shot followed. Shadow attacked. No command needed. No hesitation. The shepherd hit the man full force, jaws closing on the wrist that held the gun. Bone cracked. A scream of pain. The weapon clattered to the floor. David was on him in an instant, driving him against the wall, delivering a punch that snapped the man's head back. Another to the solar plexus that drove the air from his lungs. The false nurse slumped, fight gone, wrist mangled by Shadow's powerful jaws. David kicked the fallen gun away, then cuffed the man's uninjured hand to the bed rail. Only then did he turn his attention to Emma. The girl lay where she had fallen, still unresponsive, still locked in whatever mental prison Holloway had created for her. Shadow whined, nudging her gently with his muzzle. No response. Shouts in the corridor, running footsteps, hospital security and police, finally responding to the gunshots. "In here," David called. "Officer needs assistance." As the room filled with personnel, security guards, nurses, the officer who should have been at the door, found unconscious in a supply closet. David knelt beside Emma, checking for injuries. She was physically unharmed, but the vacant eyes, the limp body told a different story. Whatever progress she had made, whatever small connection had been forming, was gone, retreated back into the depths of her damaged mind. Shadow pressed against her, whining softly, trying to reestablish the bond. But Emma was beyond reach now. Lost again in the darkness Holloway had created. The false nurse was taken into custody, his injuries treated under guard. Coleman arrived, face grim, to question the man personally. "He's not talking," the sergeant reported afterward. "Professional, trained, probably military background." "One of Holloway's network," David said. "He came specifically for Emma, called her a breakthrough case. He said she resisted the treatments longer than the others." Coleman's expression darkened. "Holloway's not just running, he's trying to reclaim his research, his subjects. He'll try again." "Not here. We're moving all the children to secure facilities. Different locations. Guards vetted personally by the FBI task force." Coleman ran a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in every line. "This is bigger than we thought, Lynch. Much bigger." David looked at Emma, now back in the hospital bed, monitors reattached, sedated for her own safety. Shadow lay beside the bed, refusing to leave, maintaining his vigil despite the chaos around them. "I want to stay with her," David said. "With them, until she's moved." Coleman nodded. "Of course, but after that, I need you on the investigation. Holloway's still out there. His network's still active. We need to find him, shut it all down before more children disappear." As Coleman left, David sat beside the bed, watching Emma's chest rise and fall with each shallow breath. Shadow rested his head on the edge of the mattress, amber eyes never leaving the girl's face. "We'll find him," David promised quietly. "We'll stop him, and then we'll help you come back to us. Both of you." Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Mason Creek. A new day. The first day of a hunt that would lead David into darkness he couldn't yet imagine. Into the heart of a conspiracy decades in the making. Into a battle for the souls of children who had been unmade by a man who thought himself their savior. But for now, in this quiet room, David Lynch kept watch alongside a boy who had refused to abandon his charge. Two guardians united by purpose, by the need to protect, by the determination to bring light into shadows where monsters dwelled. The true fight was just beginning. 3 weeks passed. The children from the Wilson house were relocated to specialized facilities across New England, some showing signs of recovery, others still locked in the prison of their own minds. The investigation expanded, tentacles reaching into hospitals, foster care systems, psychiatric facilities across multiple states. And William Holloway remained at large. David Lynch stood at the window of his apartment, Watching rain streak the glass, Shadow at his side. The shepherd had been officially certified as his canine partner, complete with badge and tactical vest. Coleman had expedited the process, recognizing the unique bond that had formed between man and dog during those fateful nights. The phone rang. Coleman. Lynch, we've got something. Burlington PD picked up a known associate of Holloway's, former nurse at the psychiatric hospital. She's talking, trying to cut a deal. What's she saying? That Holloway has a second facility, a backup, somewhere in the mountains near the Canadian border. A place he called the Sanctuary. The mountains. Remote. Difficult terrain, perfect for hiding, perfect for continuing his work without interference. And the children, the ones still missing from other jurisdictions? She thinks they're there, along with his research, his records, everything we couldn't find at the Wilson house. David felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. He's starting over. Looks that way. FBI's coordinating a search, but it's rough country up there. Hundreds of square miles of wilderness. Could take weeks to find this place, if it even exists. Shadow had been listening, head tilted, ears forward. At the mention of children, he tensed, recognizing the word that had driven his mission for so long. Maybe we don't need weeks, David said, watching the shepherd. Maybe we have something better than satellite imagery and grid searches. What's that? A dog who's already found Holloway's victims once, who has a personal stake in this. Silence on the line as Coleman considered. You think Shadow can track Holloway? After all this time, in this weather? Not track in the traditional sense, but he was part of Holloway's program. He knows the man's scent, his methods. And if the nurse is right about other children being at this facility, it's thin, Lynch. It's something. And every day we wait is another day those kids are in his hands. Coleman sighed. All right, come in. We'll coordinate with the FBI, set up a search parameter based on the nurse's information. But no promises. This is still their jurisdiction. David knelt beside Shadow after ending the call. The shepherd met his gaze, alert, ready. You up for another hunt, boy? Finding more kids like Emma? At the name, Shadow's ears perked forward. A soft whine escaped his throat. Yeah, I miss her too. Maybe this will help her somehow. Help them all. The Mason Creek Police Department buzzed with activity. FBI agents in suits moved between desks, coordinating with local officers. Maps spread across bulletin boards. Photos of missing children. Holloway's face, the distinguished doctor turned fugitive, at the center of it all. Special Agent Catherine Reeves led the task force. 40-something, silver threading through dark hair cropped short, eyes that had seen the worst humanity had to offer and hadn't flinched. She looked up as David entered with Shadow. Detective Lynch, I've heard a lot about you and your partner. The briefing room was crowded. FBI agents, state police, local officers from 3 counties, maps of northern Vermont and the adjacent Canadian border displayed on screens. Agent Reeves stood at the front, laser pointer in hand. Based on the information from our informant, we believe Holloway's secondary facility is located somewhere in this region. The red dot circled an area of dense forest and mountains, approximately 200 square miles of wilderness. Limited road access, few permanent residents, ideal for someone who doesn't want to be found. She continued, outlining the search parameters, the resources being deployed. Helicopter surveillance, ground teams, coordination with Canadian authorities in case Holloway attempted to cross the border. We're looking for structures that don't appear on official records. Power usage inconsistent with the location. Supply deliveries to remote areas. Anything unusual. David studied the map, Shadow sitting attentively at his feet. The area was vast, densely forested, riddled with caves, abandoned mines, hunting cabins. A needle in a haystack didn't begin to describe the challenge. One more resource we may be able to utilize, Reeves said, nodding toward David. Detective Lynch and his canine partner. The dog has a unique connection to Holloway's operation. May be able to identify locations or materials associated with his work. Skeptical glances from some of the agents. A dog finding what satellite imagery and thermal scanning couldn't? It seemed far-fetched, but Coleman backed him up. Shadow found the Wilson house, led Detective Lynch to the children there. He was part of Holloway's program, trained to work with the victims. He knows what we're looking for better than any of us. Reeves nodded. At this point, we'll take any advantage we can get. Detective Lynch and Shadow will accompany Alpha Team to the search area tomorrow. 0600 hours. We'll coordinate from there. As the meeting broke up, David approached the map, studying it more closely. Shadow at his side, amber eyes fixed on the same terrain. What are we missing, boy? Where would he go? Reeves joined them, her expression thoughtful. You really think the dog can help find this place? I think he's our best shot. Shadow was inside Holloway's operation. Saw how it worked. Escaped and spent weeks trying to get those kids out. He has motivation. Motivation. Reeves said the word carefully, weighing it. Not a term we usually apply to canine units. Shadow's not usual. Whatever Holloway did to him, it created something more. A purpose. A mission. Reeves studied the shepherd, who returned her gaze with intelligent assessment. Well, Detective, I hope you are right, because those children are running out of time. Dawn painted the mountains with pale gold light as the search teams assembled. 4 vehicles, 2 FBI tactical units, a canine transport for David and Shadow, and a mobile command center. Equipment checked, communications tested. Routes assigned, David knelt beside Shadow, adjusting the dog's tactical vest. We find them today, boy, all of them. The shepherd's posture was alert, focused, ready for the mission ahead. Agent Reeves approached, field gear replacing yesterday's suit. We'll start with the areas closest to the last confirmed Holloway sighting. Work our way outward in a standard search pattern. Your K9 shows any reaction, anything at all, you radio it in immediately. The convoy moved out, winding into the mountains on narrow roads still slick from yesterday's rain. Forest closed around them, dense pines blocking the early sun, the kind of wilderness where a man could disappear, where anything could happen without witnesses. 4 hours into the search, they had nothing. Shadow had shown interest in several locations: an abandoned ranger station, a hunting camp, a remote cabin, but each had proven empty. No sign of Holloway, no sign of children. They stopped at a crossroads, consulting maps, recalibrating the search grid. Shadow paced restlessly in the back of the K9 unit, whining softly. What is it, boy? David opened the door, letting the shepherd out. You sensing something? Shadow moved to the edge of the road, nose working the air, ears swiveling to catch sounds beyond human perception. Then he stopped, body tense, gaze fixed on a distant ridge barely visible through the trees. Reeves noticed. Your dog found something? Maybe. He's focused on that ridge. The agent studied the map. There's nothing marked there, no structures, no roads. Perfect place to hide something you don't want found. The decision was made. Alpha Team would investigate the ridge while Beta continued the planned search pattern. If nothing turned up, they'd regroup and reevaluate. The terrain grew rougher as they left the main road, following a logging trail that wound upward through increasingly dense forest. The vehicles struggled over ruts and washouts, progress slowing to a crawl. Eventually, they could go no further. The trail ended at a wall of vegetation, too thick for vehicles to penetrate. We continue on foot, Reeves decided. Standard formation, Lynch and the K9 take point. Shadow led the way, moving with purpose through the underbrush. David followed close behind, the rest of the team fanning out in a search pattern behind them. The ridge loomed ahead, rocky outcroppings jutting from the forest like broken teeth. The shepherd paused often, sniffing the air, checking direction, then continuing with renewed determination. Not following a specific scent, the rain had washed away any trail Holloway might have left, but something more instinctive, a knowing. The climb grew steeper. The team moved in silence, conserving breath for the ascent. Shadow never hesitated, picking the most efficient route through the difficult terrain. Near the top of the ridge, the shepherd stopped, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. David signaled the team to halt, then move forward cautiously. Shadow had found something. At first, he saw nothing, just more forest, more rocks. Then, as he adjusted his angle, it appeared, a seam in the rock face. Unnatural, regular, a door camouflaged to blend with the surrounding stone. Reeves joined him, voice low. Bunker? Looks that way. The agent signaled the team forward, weapons ready. Standard breach protocol. We don't know what's on the other side. Shadow growled again, more urgently now. The door. He wanted past that door. The tactical team moved into position. Charges placed at strategic points around the camouflaged entrance. Everyone back, taking cover behind trees and rocks. The explosion was controlled, precise. When the dust cleared, a dark opening gaped in the rock face. Shadow surged forward before anyone could stop him, disappearing into the darkness. Shadow, David followed, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. Inside, the rough stone gave way immediately to finished walls, polished concrete floors, recessed lighting that flickered on automatically, triggered by their entry. A facility, modern, well-equipped, and completely unlike the decaying hospital in Mason Creek. Shadow was already moving down the main corridor, his nails clicking on the hard floor. David followed, aware of the tactical team securing rooms behind him. But his focus was on the shepherd, on where the dog was leading him. The corridor ended at a security door. No keypad this time. A biometric scanner. Holloway had upgraded his security. Shadow whined, pawing at the door. Whatever, whoever was beyond it. The shepherd was determined to reach them. The tactical team's breacher assessed the lock. High end, will need to cut through. 10 minutes minimum. Shadow's whine grew more urgent. 10 minutes was too long. 10 minutes could be the difference between rescue and tragedy. David examined the door frame, looking for weaknesses. The hinges. If we can access the pins. The breacher nodded, understanding. Tools appeared. Precision work. Delicate, despite the urgency. The door security was focused on the lock mechanism. The hinges were standard, accessible from their side. 5 minutes. The pins removed. The door now held in place only by the lock itself. Stand back, the breacher warned. A controlled charge. A muffled thump. The door sagged inward, hanging awkwardly from the lock. Shadow squeezed through the gap before anyone could stop him. David followed, shoving the damaged door wider. The space beyond stole his breath. A laboratory. Larger, more sophisticated than the one beneath the Wilson house. Workstations with advanced medical equipment. Monitoring systems. And at the center, a circular area ringed with what could only be described as chambers. Pods. Each large enough to hold a child. 20 of them. All occupied, and all containing small, still forms connected via IV lines and monitoring equipment. Shadow raced to one of the pods, pawing at the clear panel that formed its front, whining frantically. David approached, dread building in his chest. Inside the pod, a child. A girl. Dark hair, pale skin. Emma. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow, electrodes attached to her temples, her forehead, the base of her skull. The monitoring equipment beside the pod displayed brainwave patterns, constantly shifting. We need medical in here now, David called out. Children, multiple subjects. The tactical team flooded the room, securing the space, checking each pod. 20 children. It's ranging from approximately 6 to 14, all in the same state as Emma, all connected to the same monitoring system. Reeves joined David at Emma's pod, her expression tight with controlled fury. What is this? What's he doing to them? Before David could answer, a voice came from a speaker somewhere above them. Cultured, precise. William Holloway. Detective Lynch, I've been expecting you, though not quite so soon. Your canine partner continues to impress. David scanned the room, looking for cameras. Show yourself, Holloway. In due time. First, I should warn you, those pods are connected to a central system. Any attempt to remove the children without proper shutdown protocols will trigger a cascade failure. In layman's terms, it would be fatal. Shadow growled, sensing the voice of his former captor, his abuser. What are you doing to them? David demanded. Continuing my work. Perfecting it. These children, so damaged, so troubled, are being reborn. Their minds remapped, their traumas erased, their potential unlocked. You're erasing who they are, their identities, their autonomy. I'm erasing their pain, detective, their anger, their fear, the very things that would have prevented them from ever finding homes, ever being accepted. Holloway's voice took on a zealous quality. Do you know how many children age out of the foster system each year? How many end up homeless, addicted, incarcerated? I'm saving them from that fate. By turning them into puppets, empty vessels. By turning them into children someone will want. Children who can be loved without complication. The tactical team had completed their sweep of the laboratory. No sign of Holloway physically present. The voice came from a sophisticated communication system built into the facility. Reeves joined the conversation. Dr. Holloway, this is Special Agent Catherine Reeves, FBI. You are surrounded. Your facility is compromised. Surrender now and help us safely remove these children. A soft laugh. Agent Reeves, I've reviewed your file, distinguished career, specializing in crimes against children. You, of all people, should understand what I'm trying to accomplish. How many broken children have you seen? How many beyond help? Beyond hope? None, Reeves answered firmly. No child is beyond hope, not if they're given the right support, the right care. A beautiful sentiment, but we both know the system doesn't provide that support, that care. Not consistently, not adequately. Holloway paused. What I offer is certainty, guaranteed outcomes. Children who can be integrated into families without the baggage of their pasts. Without their identities, you mean, David interjected. Without their souls. An interesting choice of words from a man who lost his own soul 2 years ago in those woods, who couldn't save one child, and now presumes to judge me for saving many. The words struck like physical blows. How did Holloway know the details of that night? The night Max died. The night the collector escaped with his victim. You track my career that closely? Your career, your deterioration, your potential as a subject, your rejection of the help I offered. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. It was you. You were connected to the collector. Connected is perhaps too strong a word. Let's say our interests occasionally aligned. He procured, I refined, a beneficial arrangement until his methods became excessive. David's mind raced, pieces falling into place. The child in the woods, Max's death, the offer of specialized therapy afterward, the timing of the first disappearances from the children's home. That child, the one I couldn't save, was intended for your program. Yes, a particularly promising case, severe trauma history, multiple foster placements, exactly the profile we sought. Your interference was unfortunate. Shadow growled, sensing David's distress, his rising anger. Where are you, Holloway? Where are you hiding while you play God with these children's lives? Closer than you might think, Detective, and not hiding, observing, always observing. The true scientist never steps completely away from his work. Reeves signaled her team, who began a methodical sweep of the walls, looking for hidden doors, observation windows, any place Holloway might be concealed. The children, Dr. Holloway, she said, keeping him talking. Tell us how to safely disconnect them from your system. A simple procedure, Agent Reeves, but one I will only perform myself under specific conditions. You're not in a position to make demands. I'm in the only position that matters. These children's lives depend on my cooperation. The shutdown sequence is complex, requiring precise timing and monitoring of vital signs. Attempt it without me, and the results will be unfortunate. David studied Emma's pod, the connections, the monitoring equipment, too complex to risk tampering with. Holloway was right about that much. What do you want, he asked, knowing negotiation was their only option if they wanted to save the children. Safe passage for myself and my research. These children are merely the latest iteration. My work extends far beyond this facility, beyond these mountains. Children I've helped are already placed in homes across the country, living normal lives, proving the success of my methods. And in exchange, I'll deactivate the system, release the children. They'll require specialized care, of course. Their reintegration will be challenging, but they'll live. Reeves and David exchanged glances. Standard procedure prohibited negotiating with criminals. But 20 children's lives hung in the balance. The tactically correct choice and the morally right one diverged sharply. Before either could respond, Shadow suddenly tensed, ears forward, gaze fixed on a section of wall behind the central monitoring station. A low growl built in his throat. the sound of recognition and hatred combined. David followed the dog's line of sight. Nothing visible, just another blank wall in the sterile laboratory. But Shadow knew. Shadow sensed what humans couldn't. "He's behind that wall," David said quietly to Reeves, "watching us." The agent nodded almost imperceptibly, then spoke loudly enough for Holloway to hear. "We need time to consider your proposal, Doctor. The children's safety is our priority, but we have protocols to follow. Of course, take the time you need, but not too much time. The system requires regular maintenance. Without it, stability cannot be guaranteed." While Reeves continued the conversation, keeping Holloway's attention, David moved closer to Shadow, following the dog's unwavering focus on the seemingly solid wall. Up close, he could see it, the faintest seam in the paneling, a hidden door. He signaled the tactical team. Two operators moved silently into position, specialized equipment ready to detect security systems, breach mechanisms, anything that might trigger an alarm. Shadow remained focused, hackles raised, a low continuous growl emanating from deep in his chest. The dog who had been part of Holloway's experiments, who had escaped, who had spent weeks trying to save the children, that dog now had his former captor in his sights. The tactical operators completed their assessment. A nod to Reeves. The hidden door had been identified, its security systems mapped. A breach was possible. Reeves continued the negotiation, keeping Holloway engaged. "Your research data, how extensive is it? We'll need to evaluate what exactly we're allowing to leave with you." 20 years of work, Agent Reeves. The complete neurological mapping of over 200 subjects. Treatment protocols, long-term outcome studies, the foundation for a revolution in childhood psychiatric care. "And the side effects, the children who didn't respond well to your treatments? You must have had failures." A pause. When Holloway spoke again, his voice had cooled. "Every breakthrough has its cost. Those who couldn't be helped. Their contributions to the greater good should not be diminished." "How many, Doctor? How many children died for your greater good?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You're stalling, Agent Reeves, attempting to maneuver while we talk. I admire the strategy, but it's unnecessary. I've planned for this contingency as I plan for all eventualities." The tactical team was ready. Charges set at key points around the hidden door, all personnel in position, awaiting only the command. David knelt beside Shadow, one hand on the shepherd's back, feeling the tension in the powerful muscles. "Easy, boy. Almost time." Reeves made the call. "Breach on my mark. 3, 2, 1, that's execute." The charges detonated with controlled precision. The hidden door blew inward, revealing a small observation room beyond. Monitors showing every angle of the laboratory, medical equipment, a desk with multiple computers, and William Holloway rising from his chair with remarkable calm for a man whose sanctuary had just been violated. He was older than his photos suggested, thinner, but the eyes were the same, cold, analytical, seeing humans as subjects rather than people. "Disappointing, Agent Reeves. I thought we were negotiating in good faith." The tactical team flooded the room, securing Holloway with practiced efficiency. The doctor offered no resistance, his hands raised in a gesture that managed to seem condescending rather than submissive. Shadow lunged forward, restrained only by David's command. "Stay!" The shepherd stopped, quivering with the effort of holding himself back, eyes fixed on Holloway with undisguised hatred. Subject K-17, Holloway said, regarding Shadow with clinical interest, still displaying the heightened attachment response. "Fascinating. The neural bond formed more permanently than we anticipated." "His name is Shadow," David said coldly, "and he's not your subject anymore." Names, so important to humans, so irrelevant to the actual organism. Holloway's gaze shifted to David. "Like the name you gave to your previous partner. Max. A designation loaded with emotional significance for you, but meaningless to the animal itself." David felt his control slipping. The casual dismissal of Max, of Shadow, of their identity and worth. The reduction of living, feeling beings to mere research subjects. "The children, Holloway, tell us how to safely disconnect them." "Of course, as I said, I have no desire to harm my subjects. Their value is incalculable." Holloway moved toward the desk, tactical operators flanking him closely. The shutdown sequence is accessed through this terminal. A specific protocol must be followed to avoid neural shock. Reeves signaled for the FBI's technical specialist to join them. You'll guide our specialist through the procedure, step by step. As you wish. Holloway seated himself at the terminal, the specialist beside him. The program first requires authentication. My voice print and password. He leaned toward the computer, speaking clearly. Holloway, William E. Authorization Prometheus Alpha 79. The screen changed, displaying a complex interface of neural readings, vital signs, and system diagnostics for all 20 pods. Now the shutdown must be sequential, beginning with the peripheral nervous system connections, then the deeper neural interfaces. Any deviation will trigger a fail-safe response. The specialist watched intently as Holloway began the procedure, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision. David maintained his position near the door, shadow at his side. Something felt wrong. Holloway's cooperation seemed too ready, too complete. The man who had built this facility, who had evaded capture for weeks, who had operated in secret for decades, would he surrender so easily? The shutdown sequence continued. On the monitors, the first changes became visible. Children in the pods stirring slightly as connections were removed. The initial phase is complete, Holloway announced. Now we move to the secondary systems, more delicate, requiring even greater precision. His fingers continued their dance across the keyboard, more changes on the monitors, more movement from the children. And then David saw it, a pattern in the keystrokes, a sequence that didn't match the actions on screen, a deception. Stop him! David lunged forward, but it was too late. Holloway pressed the final key with a flourish. Alarms blared throughout the facility. On the monitors, the children's vital signs spiked dangerously. What have you done? Reeves demanded, weapon trained on Holloway. The doctor smiled serenely. Ensured my life's work will not be destroyed. The children are now locked in a cascading neural feedback loop. Try to remove them from the pods, and their minds collapse completely. Try to alter the program, and the same occurs. Only I can stop it, and only if you meet my original terms. Shadow growled, sensing the shift in the room, the new danger to the children he had tried so hard to save. David's mind raced. 20 children, Emma among them, all now hostages to Holloway's twisted ethics. You'll let them die to protect your research? They won't die, Detective. Their bodies will continue to function, but their minds, what makes them individuals, that will be gone. A small price for the greater advancement of science. The tactical team looked to Reeves for direction. Standard procedure had no template for this situation. David moved to Emma's pod, studying the connections, the monitors displaying her increasingly erratic vital signs. Shadow followed, whining softly as he recognized the girl. There has to be a way, David said, more to himself than anyone else. A weakness in the system, an override. Holloway laughed softly. My system has no weaknesses, Detective. It was designed with multiple redundancies, multiple fail-safes. You cannot outsmart it because you cannot understand it, not without years of specialized training. Shadow pressed his nose against the clear panel of Emma's pod, whining more urgently now. The girl inside stirred slightly, her eyes still closed but her expression changing, as if responding to a familiar presence even through the barrier between them. And in that moment, David understood. The bond, he said quietly, the neural bond you created between the Tays and the children. That's the key, isn't it? That's what you couldn't control. What caused Shadow to rebel against your program? Holloway's serene expression faltered slightly. A minor flaw in an otherwise perfect system. The canine subjects formed attachments stronger than anticipated, became protective rather than controlling. It's been corrected in later iterations. Not a flaw, David countered, a fundamental truth you overlooked. You can't erase the connection between living beings. You can't program loyalty, love, protection. It grows on its own, follows its own rules. He turned to the technical specialist. The neural feedback loop. It's designed to prevent external intervention in the children's minds. But what about a connection that's already established? A pathway that already exists? The specialist considered, eyes darting between the monitors and Shadow. Theoretically, if there is an existing neural pathway, it might bypass the feedback loop. But we'd need a way to activate it, strengthen it beyond what Holloway's system can suppress. David knelt beside Shadow. That's where you come in, boy. You found Emma once. You can find her again. Shadow whined softly, understanding in those intelligent amber eyes. Holloway's composure cracked further. This is absurd. The canine subjects were never intended to counter the primary protocols. They were tools, nothing more. That's where you're wrong, David said, rising. They were partners, just like Max was my partner. Just like Shadow is now. And partners don't abandon each other. He turned to Reeves. We need to get Shadow connected to the system the same way the children are connected. He can reach Emma through the bond Holloway created. Use that connection to break the feedback loop. The agent looked skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything. And if it doesn't work, then we're no worse off than we are now. The technical specialist moved quickly, extracting what they needed from Holloway's computers, while the doctor watched with growing alarm. You'll kill them all, he warned. The feedback loop is designed to be impenetrable. Any attempt to breach it will trigger a complete neural collapse. David ignored him, focusing on preparing Shadow for what was to come. The shepherd stood calmly as electrodes were attached to his head, his neck, understanding somehow that this was necessary to save Emma and the others. The connection needs to be established directly with the central system, the specialist explained. The pod containing the primary subject, Emma, needs to be linked to a secondary input, something Holloway never anticipated, a backdoor, essentially. The modifications were made. Shadow connected to the system that held 20 children hostage. The shepherd's vital signs now displayed on the monitors alongside the children's, his brainwaves forming patterns remarkably similar to Emma's. The bond is still there, David observed, even after everything Holloway did to break it. The specialist nodded. It's stronger than it should be, almost as if they're reaching for each other, David finished. Even now, Shadow stood perfectly still, the electrodes transmitting his brain activity directly into the system, into the neural pathway that connected him to Emma. His eyes remained fixed on the pod, on the girl inside. On the monitors, Emma's vital signs began to stabilize, her brainwaves shifting to match Shadow's more closely. It's working, the specialist said, wonder in her voice. He's pulling her out of the feedback loop, giving her a path back. Holloway stared in disbelief. Impossible. The system was designed to prevent exactly this kind of interference. You designed it to prevent human interference, David corrected. You never accounted for the bond you created between Shadow and Emma, a bond that exists outside your protocols, your fail-safes. As they watched, Emma's eyes opened, not vacant anymore, alert, aware, searching until they found Shadow on the other side of the clear panel. Recognition flooded her face. Shadow, she whispered, the word clear despite the barrier between them. The primary subject is stabilizing, the specialist reported, fingers flying across the keyboard. And the others, they're following the same pattern, using the pathways Shadow created through Emma. One by one, the children in the pods began to wake. Not to the vacant half-life Holloway had designed for them, but to full consciousness, eyes opening, awareness returning. It's a cascade effect, the specialist explained. Shadow broke the feedback loop for Emma. She's breaking it for the others. The very network Holloway built to control them is now being used to free them. The doctor's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Years of work, decades of research, undone by a doll. It's not possible. It's not scientific. It's more scientific than you know, David said quietly. The most fundamental force in nature. Connection. Compassion. The thing you try to engineer out of these kids is the very thing saving them now. With the feedback loop broken, the medical team moved in, carefully disconnecting the children from Holloway's machines. Each child emerging, confused, disoriented, but alive. Present in ways they hadn't been for months, perhaps years. Emma was the last to be freed from her pod. As the final connections were removed, she reached instinctively for Shadow, small fingers burying themselves in his fur. The shepherd pressed against her, a soft whine of recognition and relief escaping his throat. She remembers, David said, watching them. Despite everything Holloway did to erase her, she remembers. Reeves joined him, her professional demeanor softened by the scene before them. They all seemed to be remembering. It's as if the shutdown of Holloway's system allowed their original personalities to resurface. Not just that, David said. Shadow gave them a path back, a connection to who they were before all this. As Holloway was led away in restraints, still protesting the impossibility of what had occurred, David knelt beside Emma and Shadow. The girl looked up at him, her eyes clear and intelligent. "You came back for us," she said softly. "You and Shadow. We promised we would. The bad doctor, he made us forget, made us sleep inside ourselves." She shuddered, leaning against Shadow for comfort. "But Shadow found me, in the dark place. He showed me the way out." The medical team arrived to transport the children to hospitals for evaluation and treatment. As they prepared to take Emma, she clung to Shadow, panic flaring in her eyes. "No, he has to come too. He'll get lost again without me." David looked to Reeves, who nodded her understanding. "The dog stays with the girl. For now, until we're certain she's stable." Relief washed over Emma's face. She allowed herself to be placed on a stretcher, Shadow walking beside her, never breaking contact. "You'll come too?" she asked David, suddenly afraid again. "I'll be right behind you, all the way to the hospital. I promise." As the procession of ambulances wound its way down from the mountain facility, David rode with Emma and Shadow, watching as the girl drifted into natural sleep, one hand still buried in the shepherd's fur. The bond between them had saved not just Emma, but all 20 children. A bond Holloway had created but never understood, never respected. A connection between living beings that transcended his protocols and programming. At the hospital, the children were evaluated, treated, begun on the long road to recovery. Some would heal faster than others. Some might never fully recover from what had been done to them. But they had been given back their chance at a real life, not the hollow simulation Holloway had designed. Emma's case was unique. As the child who had formed the strongest bond with Shadow, who had resisted Holloway's treatments the longest, she showed the most rapid improvement. Within days, she was speaking in complete sentences, remembering details of her life before captivity, and Shadow never left her side. 2 months later, the mountain facility had been fully documented, its secrets exposed to the world. Holloway and his network, doctors, administrators, officials who had facilitated his work, were facing multiple charges. The full extent of his operation was still being uncovered, with children identified in foster homes and adoptive families across the country, all bearing the neural signatures of his treatment. David Lynch stood outside the courthouse where the preliminary hearings were being held, Shadow at his side. The shepherd now wore a dual certification, both as a police canine and as a therapy dog, specially trained to work with the children recovering from Holloway's experiments. Coleman approached, coffee in hand. "Thought you could use this. Been a long morning." David accepted the cup gratefully. Holloway's attorneys are pulling out all the stops, claiming his work was sanctioned research, that he was helping children no one else could help. Not going to fly, not with the evidence we have, not with 20 kids who can testify to what he did to them. If they can testify, some are still struggling. The damage wasn't just physical. Coleman nodded grimly. "I know, but they have a chance now, because of you, because of Shadow." The shepherd perked up at his name, amber eyes meeting David's. "He's the real hero in all this. I was just following his lead." Partnership works both ways, Lynch. You recognized what he was trying to tell you when no one else would listen. Trusted him when it mattered most. David crouched, running a hand over Shadow's head. "We understood each other. Both of us had lost someone. Both of us were looking for redemption." A car pulled up to the curb. Rachel Winters emerged, helping Emma from the back seat. The girl had been placed in a specialized foster home, with Rachel overseeing her case personally. Today would be her first time facing Holloway in court. She spotted Shadow immediately, her face lighting up. "Shadow, David!" The shepherd moved to meet her, tail wagging with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. This was not the focused canine officer, but a dog greeting his person, his friend. Emma knelt, arms around Shadow's neck. I missed you. Is today the day we make the bad doctor go away forever? That's the plan, David said gently. But remember what we talked about. You only have to tell the truth. Just what you remember, nothing more. Emma nodded solemnly. I remember everything now. Shadow helped me find all the memories the bad doctor tried to hide. Inside the courtroom, Holloway sat with his legal team, still projecting the calm authority of a distinguished physician, despite the prison jumpsuit, despite the evidence mounted against him. When Emma entered with Shadow by her side, a special dispensation granted by the judge due to her unique circumstances, Holloway's composure cracked. A flash of genuine fear crossed his features, quickly suppressed. The girl who had defied his programming. The book who had broken his system, the living proof that his life's work was fundamentally flawed. Emma's testimony was clear, direct, devastating in its simplicity. She described what had been done to her. The piss, the drugs, the feeling of being erased, piece by piece, until only a shell remained. And then the return, Shadow finding her in the dark place, leading her back to herself. Throughout, Shadow remained at her side, alert, protective, a living shield between the girl and the man who had tried to unmake her. When it was over, when Emma stepped down from the witness stand, Holloway's fate was sealed. No jury would acquit him after hearing a child describe, in painful detail, the systematic destruction of her identity. Outside the courthouse, Emma knelt once more beside Shadow. We did it. We told them the truth. Now the bad doctor can't hurt any more kids. David watched them together, the girl and the child who had saved each other, who had saved 20 other children through their unbreakable bond. What happens now? Emma asked, looking up at David. Will Shadow come live with me? The question cut to the heart of the matter. Shadow was David's partner now, officially certified, a vital part of the ongoing investigation into Holloway's network. But his connection to Emma was undeniable, perhaps even necessary for her continued healing. Shadow has an important job to do, David said gently, helping find other children, like you, making sure they're safe. Disappointment clouded Emma's face. But he's my friend. He found me in the dark place. David knelt beside him. And he'll always be your friend. But right now, there are other kids still lost in dark places. Kids who need Shadow to find them. Just like he found you. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Like a rescue dog? Saving people who are lost? Exactly like that. Emma considered this, her small face serious. Then she turned to Shadow, hands on either side of the shepherd's face, looking directly into his amber eyes. You have to go help the other kids, she told him solemnly. Find them like you found me, but then you come back and visit. Promise? Shadow whined softly, nudging her face with his nose. A promise in the only language he had. David felt something shift in his chest, the final piece of a healing that had begun the night he first saw Shadow sitting vigil outside the Wilson house. A completion of the circle that had started 2 years ago in a rain-soaked forest, with a child he couldn't save and a partner he had lost. Some wounds never fully heal. Some losses leave permanent scars. But new connections form. New purposes emerge from the ashes of failure and grief. Shadow had found his purpose, first in saving Emma and the others, now in continuing to seek out those who remain lost. And David had found his again, in listening when others wouldn't, in trusting the wisdom of a being many dismissed as just a dog, in fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. As they walked away from the courthouse, David, Emma, and Shadow moved as a unit, bound by something stronger than Holloway's twisted science could ever create or destroy. A connection forged in darkness, but thriving now in the light. A reminder that even in the shadows, hope remains, if only we have the courage to look for it. 6 months later, the Mason Creek Park was transformed. Where the Wilson house had once stood, a memorial garden now bloomed. Benches for reflection, a playground for children, and at its center, a bronze statue of a German shepherd, vigilant and proud, watching over all who entered. David Lynch stood before the statue, Shadow at his side. The shepherd had adapted well to his dual role, police canine and therapy dog for the children still recovering from Holloway's experiments. His bond with Emma remained strong, their weekly visits a highlight for both. The girl herself was thriving in her new foster home, with adoption proceedings underway. Her recovery had been remarkable. her resilience inspiring others who had suffered under Holloway's program. Coleman joined them, hands in pockets against the autumn chill. Nice statue, good likeness. Emma thinks the ears are too pointy, David said with a smile, but Shadow seems to approve. The shepherd sat tall beside his partner, as if aware of his bronze counterpart's significance. How's the investigation going? David asked. Any more of Holloway's network identified? 3 more doctors last week, 2 administrators, a judge who helped expedite adoptions of the treated children. Coleman shook his head. The reach of this thing, it's like pulling threads on a sweater. Keep finding more connections the harder we look. And the children? The ones already placed in homes? Case by case, some are being monitored, receiving therapy to undo what Holloway did. Others, Coleman sighed. Some families don't want to know, don't want to acknowledge that their perfect child was manufactured, created by erasing who they really were. The moral complexities haunted them all. Children who had been altered without consent, living with families who might prefer the artificial version to the real child beneath. The ethics of undoing Holloway's work when the children themselves might not remember their original identities. Emma asked about Max yesterday, David said quietly. Wanted to know if he was like Shadow, if he saved kids too. What did you tell her? The truth, that he saved me, that he died doing what he was trained to do, protecting his partner. Shadow pressed against David's leg, a warm, solid presence. Not replacing Max, no one ever could, but carving his own place in David's life, a new partner, a new purpose. You know, Coleman said, when you first came to me about that dog staring at the Wilson house, I thought you were looking for ghosts, seeing connections that weren't there. I was, just not the way you thought. David smiled slightly. Sometimes the ghosts are real. Sometimes the connections are exactly what they seem. As they turned to leave, David cast one last glance at the bronze shadow standing guard over the park, over the memory of 23 children who had been lost and then found. A silent sentinel reminding all who pass that vigilance matters. That bearing witness matters. That sometimes salvation comes not from the most powerful or the most educated, but from those who simply refuse to look away. The real shadow walked beside him, alert as always, ready for whatever mission came next. The shepherd who had led him from darkness back into light, who had shown him that even the deepest wounds could heal, given time and the right companion for the journey. Together they moved forward into the gathering dusk, guardian and protector both. Different species, same purpose, to find those lost in the shadows and bring them safely home.